Monday, July 19th at 6 o'clock, and this is the Board of Selectmen's meeting. And if I could have somebody make a motion for waiving of the reading of the Zoom instructions.
So moved.
Second.
Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So this is going to be, the first part of this meeting is going to be the discussion of the town administrator's mid-year review. And I'm going to have Carol, I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and she's going to facilitate because she did not participate in the review itself. So she will keep us on the straight and narrow. So we'll let her take it over.
So as we sent out a little bit of guidelines for tonight, I'm going to cover each topic one at a time. If you can highlight one or two pieces, I'm going to try to keep us to 2 minutes. If something's going longer, I think it shows that we might need to have a longer conversation, and we'll make note of that and come back to it at another meeting. So, I think we'll just start to my right, and we're going to address communication. Leah, if you could.
For communication, I think generally Ron communicates well with the board. I think sometimes things get lost, and I'm not sure if it's like I don't get a lot of the emails from Joe, for example. And I don't know if that's coming from, it shouldn't come from, we shouldn't see everything or what, but sometimes I think specifically with Joe, he has said a number of times that he sent stuff around to the board, and I've never seen that. And so that's just one example. I think generally it's good. I think I've said a few times in my review, to remember that we are a 5-member board, and we all have we come at things from a much different perspective. So obviously working closely with the chair, co-chairs, but being mindful that we're a diverse board also.
Okay. Well, obviously I was chair when Ron was onboarded and as he was acclimating. I know that initially when he was onboarded, what he spoke about in his interview was finding different ways to communicate with different board members because they do have different preferences. I found during that time the communication was constant. There were a lot of times where I even felt like things were over-communicated because I know that you're trying to feel out the board and how we want to manage. Phone calls were frequent, they were thorough. What I also was impressed with was I think the preparation of your staff to communicate to the board when we had an issue of topic during meetings, to have those department heads come in and fully explain some of those things. I think to Leah's point, I had heard a couple things. I think the area that I would say, I think I mentioned this in my actual written review, is that we do just need to be cognizant that some of the board members have different styles of communication. I know that when we mostly communicated when I was chair, it was through phone calls, conversations that way. But other board members might prefer more constant with emails or something might be different. So I thought it was a good line of communication. I thought that you made a very good effort initially to sit everybody down when you were first onboarded and have personal meetings with each board member to establish those connections and those connection points. Responsiveness in terms of emails and queries was very timely, so I felt that was a strong suit.
Are we going through like strengths and weaknesses at the same time?
The whole communication gamut.
All right, so I looked at areas that, I see we might want to address a little bit, and, areas that there are strengths and what some of the solutions were. So, I feel that Ron's like high energy. He's got a lot of ideas. He gets very excited about things. I think that to some extent you might want to sit back and repeat some of the things that people say, because I think sometimes you're missing it. I did find that some people feel that some departments and employees and stuff don't feel you fully understand everything that they do. So I would just ask that you maybe just spend a little bit more time making sure that you're hearing what they're saying and they're hearing what you're saying. That's just good practice. Listening practices is to somewhat repeat back to what people say, and I think that would be a good thing to try to help to make sure, because you're still pretty new, to make sure where the departments are, where the employees are. So I think that'd be helpful. I have heard from different people that You discourage, or you didn't want people to talk to the select board directly from departments and the finance committee. And I know that when we first met and we interviewed and everything, and I made it very clear that we're one board, we speak as one. So I don't want the situation where like somebody on the board goes and tells Joe to go clear a road or fix something. But I want there to still be encouragement for open communication. We were elected to represent the residents, and I think we should be able to talk to our departments, find out, do information searching, not take actions, but at least have they feel welcome to communicate directly with us, both us and the finance committee with departments. So I would encourage that you encourage them to have open communication with us. To repeat what Leah had said, I think you do a great job in communicating to the select board on what's going on. And I know that you've been meeting with Central Mass Planning. You met with the state senator and the representatives and different groups. So I'm really happy with the way that you've been reaching out with with the various partners and representatives. So.
Can I ask a question? I attend CMRP things on occasion in the transportation group. Do you guys want reports of what that board's doing, even if they're not relevant to
I
the
think I
town?
covered that in one of these
you
sections.
asked me, but most of what they do is not relevant to us, so it's...
Well, I don't know which meetings you attend on the Central Mass Planning. The ones that the executive board ones they have every Thursday night. I typically participate in those, and they have a lot of other groups that come and talk about programs and opportunities. I don't know if anybody from the town sits in on that. I sit on that for my job, so I'm not going to intermingle that, but I think it's beneficial because there's a lot of groups that come there and they talk about things that could benefit the town. And if I see things, I'm always passing stuff on to you and Joe and Dave whenever I see anything, just to try to make you aware of it. So I'm not quite sure which meetings you're going to.
The MWRT, the transportation system,
Yeah.
because I attend their meetings, but it has a very minor impact on our town, but not much. So one of the comments I think was you should report to the board. Do you want to know general what's going on with that organization?
Even if you reported that you were going and what you were discussing, because I had no idea. You said you go to those meetings.
I go on the last couple of it, but
I didn't know in what fashion and what benefit. So
I'll just send you short notes about what's going on. I just didn't know if that was something interesting.
But he asked me.
I know. I'm letting Ron.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to know what kind of level
Sure.
of interest you had in that kind of stuff. But okay.
I'll let Skip. I just wanted to feed off that and just say, I think once we have some goals and objectives, it'll be helpful also to know kind of where the board is looking to go, or different boards and commissions and everything are looking to go. So then it might be a little bit more relevant to disperse some of that information.
I'm actually going to read on behalf of Jeff Stillings. Thank you, Jeff, for sending.
Does he want to speak?
Unless you want to do it, Jeff.
I can paraphrase, sure.
Go ahead. We're on the communication.
Okay. Well, first, I appreciate the chair of the board giving me the opportunity to participate, and by no means do I intend to send this as an appraisal, because I am not sitting on the board. But you asked for my 2 cents, and I'm happy to provide the 2 cents for whatever value you give that. So thank you for that. Under the communication, the notes that I had is that when I was on the select board, that Ron has always been receptive to me whenever I reached out. And what is most important to me is that when he says he's going to circle back with me on an issue, he does. And I do enjoy speaking with him professionally and even in social settings. So the communication between him and I has always been prosperous. I appreciate that. My personal style as a selectman at the time, and what I think is most important when it comes to communication, is that our town administrator has a very positive working relationship with our employees, and most especially the department heads. So I think communication is not so much as important with the 5 members of the board who come and go, but it's critical that communication between our TA and our department heads is positive, it's healthy, and constructive. So that's my feedback on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Skip.
Yeah, so we can move this on quickly. Everybody said what's needed to be said, so why don't we just save some time and go to the next one?
Perfect.
Because I have to agree with 90% of it.
Okay. Well, pipe in if you want to. Leah, personnel management?
sorry, let me just review quickly. I think that Ron's worked through some challenging staff concerns, and while supporting the department heads as needed throughout kind of the beginning, he kind of came in and there were a few, little flare-ups and everything, and I think he was a good resource to kind of support our department heads on that. I think sometimes our department heads and employees had a little more autonomy than what they are accustomed to now, and I think that some of that tension that I perceive as tension could have been mitigated had there been a sit down, just kind of like an onboarding sit down, like this is my style, this is setting those expectations versus how things have been done, whatever. I think some of that has been worked through, and it's I said in my review, some of it's a style thing. I come from a much more collaborative background, and I think having been in town not that long, but seeing the employees kind of work through all the transitions, and still the TA position being fairly new, we are accustomed to a kind of an equal setting versus a hierarchical setting, and so I think some of that's coming from a larger city or town, where you have more employees that you have to actively manage versus more collaboratively. So I think some of that's just that learning curve onboarding piece.
Yeah, I reviewed mine before we came. I wrote quite a bit, so I'm hoping that Ron, you got a chance to look at that. Yeah, I think that the personnel management's been good. I mean, I approach this a little bit differently than Leah. Working with and in municipalities for a long time, I just think that we're kind of in a community in transition because this TA position is new, and so I think the board is used to having a certain level of familiarity and authority, and prior to a TA being onboarded, and I think if you talk to the last couple of TAs, they'll tell you that there was sometimes conflict because there wasn't a barrier between select board and department heads. I mean, to Lyndon, you made a comment in the last topic of conversation. Yes, we should absolutely be able to call our department heads and have conversations, but we shouldn't be calling department heads and saying, I want this done, do this, this, and this. That has to go through the management structure for that to be effective and for the TA to be effective. So I do think that we as a town have had some challenges with that because you did have boards that were not used to having a TA. That felt like maybe they had a little bit more authority or didn't understand the nature of the position. And I do think this is kind of, we're fundamentally changing things into a more professional structure. So I think the personnel, I know that you've come into some tough issues that you had to deal with immediately. In general, we obviously had a year with a pandemic that we had to have everybody on all hands on deck. Again, the only thing that I will echo with Leah is I know that everyone has their own unique and different style. I personally, I think that our communication with each other were great. I think that you can maybe come off as maybe a little bit intimidating to some folks because of that experience and because of kind of that, nature of doing things. But overall, pretty happy, clear lines of, that hierarchy. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I just think that in order for everything to run efficiently, you do have to have that established structure. And I thought that you helped bring that to town government in what was a pretty rough transition period where we were trying to fill the position and patchwork it while we were looking for somebody. So I certainly do appreciate that.
Okay. I mean, a lot of the communication goes hand in hand with this, and I discussed a lot about the difference between managing and leading. And when we had interviewed you, there was a lot of talk about team building and teamwork, and I provided you with lots of things that I thought might be helpful ideas that you might want to consider. And I know that you've already implemented some of these things, and I appreciate that, and I know that you're working at that. So I just think that we just went through a pandemic. We didn't give cost of livings. I think it's very important that we try to keep our employees as positive as possible. Mm-hmm. So I think working as a team, that helps a lot. And like I said, I know that you've been working on a lot of different ideas. I know that you did send out goals and objectives, which is something I've been harping on, is making sure they know what is expected of them and holding them accountable for it. So I appreciate that, and hopefully that will go further so that everybody knows exactly what their job is, and then if they're not doing it, then necessary actions can be taken because they've been given the direction, and they should be accountable for it. And I also know that you've hired a lot of different positions already in your short time here, so I mean I appreciate that. I think that's about it in that section.
Thank you. Jeff?
Oh, thank you again. Under this element, just short and sweet, that during my time with Ron, we get regular updates if there's anything significant regarding personnel, and I think it was just the right amount of interaction without, us getting too far into the weeds of personnel issues in there. Just for suggestion, I'm a big fan of positive feedback whenever possible. I'd recommend you don't hesitate to give credit whenever credit is due, and you could utilize social media, different forums, or even the cable access television to promote the good stories that we have out there, make maybe a good relationship with local Holden Landmark, and then get some decent stories out there, the good things that our employees are doing.
Thank you.
The only thing I'll say is I'm glad that he's here. He's making the people do their job. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you.
Can I actually add something, Carol, real quick?
Please
too?
do.
Just under the same kind of umbrella, and something I have been impressed with, because it goes under personnel management, is right off the bat you identified deficiencies in our personnel policies, procedures, the human resources end of documentation and stuff like that we have gaps within town. As you know, looking at certain bylaws and things like that, we have things that haven't been updated in a long time. And so there was a meeting that I think I called you after that meeting. It was a long meeting. It was a couple months ago, but I feel like we accomplished more that meeting than we had in a long time. But it was going through, we needed to adopt a new policy for gifts, receiving gifts, personnel policy, anti-sexual harassment policy, all these things that brought us into compliance with state standards. I feel like we're in a much better place now because of that proactive approach than we were. So, thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I could just comment, that's okay. So first of all, thank you for all your comments. I've thought a lot about this piece because, as Lyndon said, I really focus a lot on trying to make a team. I gotta admit, it's been harder during the budget process because it was a pretty controversial budget time, and we focused a lot more on budget than I ever wanted to because it's just the nature of it. I'll say, it's interesting because I've had a couple of comments about being autocratic, and here's the answer: is yes, sometimes they can be autocratic. I don't want to be autocratic, but some managers are very good at working together as a team and doing things, and then there's some managers that let's just say they've gotten away with not doing some things that they should be doing. And I'll give you examples. When I came in, there was really no policy for giving the town administrator's office when you were going on vacation. There were no vacation slips, no personal time slips, so everybody was kind of freewheeling what they were doing, and few people were working from home without even telling me that they were working from home. So in those respects, I have to be a little bit autocratic, and you may get some negativity back to some department heads who don't like the fact that they can't just do what they want to do. You'll find that department heads who are working effectively doing their job will hear very little from me, frankly. I'm more of a support role to those people. But if a department head is hearing from me a lot or a significant amount, it's usually because they have to be, because they're not doing the job. And I just want you to keep in mind that those are the people that you're going to get feedback from. The ones who are unhappy that I'm making them keep a building open when they think they want to close it, or they want to work from home without telling me. You're going to hear those people because those are the people that want to come back to you and have complaints. I just want you to recognize that. So if you get that kind of complaint, just give me a call and say, hey, how come this one's bad? And I'll explain to you probably why you got the comment you got, because I feel strongly what Lyndon said. I like working as a team, and since we're through the budget process, it's making it a little bit easier to communicate and talk about goals and objectives, and not be talking about, okay, what are you going to cut in your budget? So it's a different mentality, I think, going forward than it has been in the last few months with all the budget stuff. So just wanted you to be aware of what that's transpiring and how that's going.
Thank you. Leah, can you start us off with financial management?
Yeah, so this was painful for me this year, and I think it was painful for everyone.
Understatement of the year.
Right. I think it was an extremely challenging budget year anyway, and it's extremely challenging coming for someone coming into with so many moving pieces, a regional district budget that takes up so much of our time and energy and funding, as well as the other moving pieces and everything. So I think it was a little rough sometimes between the town administrator and department heads and FinCom, and I felt like sometimes it was kind of an us versus them mentality, and rather than a cooperative, like, we're all in this together, and what cuts are we going to make to do this, and everything. So I think it was a combination of everything, and obviously your first time through, it's a different system than what you're accustomed to. So yeah, I just would have liked to see, I guess, a little bit more again, collaboration. But again, and I've said this multiple times, that's where I'm coming from. I was a little frustrated at times that FinCom was left to make all the, like, very hard cuts, rather than have it be or in the meetings that I was listening in on, it seemed like, okay, I got it down to whatever, now you make the final significant drastic cuts, rather than how can we do this together as a team. This cut is going to be extremely detrimental. Obviously all the cuts are extremely detrimental, but what are the longer term fallouts of those cuts? So that's
Mrs. You're going to comment directly as she's talking, because I think this is important. So it was sort of interesting, we were all asked as FinCom members and myself to come back with cuts, and we all came back with cuts. We had a little over $1 million deficit originally, and my cuts put it down to about $257,000. And FinCom was asked to do the same thing. Members, the chairs she asked the members all to come back with cuts. So I made a whole bunch of cuts that I recommended, and FinCom members had their recommendations. And I think we went through the cuts of the various departments, and all my cuts were effectively taken as part of that. The additional cuts, FinCom members, to their credit, individual members made tough cuts. Some I agreed with, some frankly I didn't agree with. But they were just thrown out there as part of what they were asked to do. So I don't think I ever left FinCom with making the hard cuts. Those members, believe it or not, took it upon themselves to make those difficult decisions. I'll say I was hesitant to make those difficult, the layoff decisions, which is mostly what we're talking about, who people got cut. Because I didn't really want to make those decisions by myself, because I am new to town. I really thought that people who lived in town should be involved in those discussions, and it shouldn't me, being new, just wiping out departments or cutting staff like that. So, and FinCom, to their credit, there was a lot of tough discussions, and Karen will tell you, me and Karen had very many times where we were at odds or uncomfortable, but in the end, at least I feel, and I hope Karen feels the same way, by the end of the process, we were working really well together, and I think we gained a lot of respect for each other and getting to know each other. At least that's the perception I took. But I didn't leave the tough cuts for FinCom. Those FinCom members took it upon themselves to really step up and suggest some difficult cuts, and they were mostly around the staffing levels.
Thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, obviously this has been a tough year. From a financial perspective, I certainly don't begrudge anybody involved in that process. I know Karen's on. I think there's a difference, and we have to delineate the difference between what in municipal government sometimes can be collaborative friction between strong personalities and what can be damaging. I hope Karen knows that I have the most respect for her in the world and the job she's done. I know she's fighting for certain things on that finance committee. I know, Ron, you're coming from the municipal side too. It was a tough process, and to Leah's point, I mean, we all sat in those meetings and we listened to everything. In going back and looking, with municipal finance being the way it is and with the team we have, I was glad that, all things considered, we did have an experienced town administrator with municipal budgeting experience, as well as Dan and Becky, obviously, and the department heads helping, because it was such a rough year. So I look at it from the perspective of, I do recognize you have that experience. I know that you're going to use that moving forward. Right now, I think we're judging you on the small sample size of what was a very difficult budget year. But I also think that I don't know how it would have ended differently in terms of the budgetary process. There was always going to be that friction, that push and pull, because these are really, really tough town trajectory altering decisions that we've had to make. So I can't really criticize the small sample size that we have thus far in that category.
Okay, so obviously this is my passion because I was on finance for many years, and every year was tough. I know it was a very difficult year last year, but we've always were dealing with the same situations. And to Leah's point, I know that you left. You were working with them to leave them with making some of the tough cuts, and you'd say you didn't want to cut cost of living or employees of this, but you didn't give like a solution. I think that was my concern, that if you didn't cut them, where were you going to cut? You didn't give them like what you thought was going to be the solution. So in the past, in working with both the previous town administrators, it was very much more interactive. I think I had suggested to you to go back and to watch some of the meetings, because I think that body language and stuff like that says a lot. And there was friction and there was difficulties in most of those meetings. And I'd like to see, talking about team, I think that's got to be a team too. You and the finance committee board need to be very much on the same page. And you're not going to agree on everything, but I think it needs to be much more interactive. And I know that like I said, a lot of difficult situations were made. But I'd like to see us, get a little bit better at working as a team in that. And the other recommendations I would make is we really need to start looking quarterly at the actuals, both the finance committee, the town administrator, and the select board, and kind of reviewing where the money was actually spent and starting the process much earlier. Because even during your interview, even Skip said to you, he talked to you about Wachusett Regional School District. I don't know if you remembered it, and he kind of warned you about how difficult it was going to be. And you had said, well, I've worked with regional school systems, and we're all sitting there saying, you haven't worked with Wachusett. There's, we all knew what the situation was going to be and how difficult it was going to be. So, like I said, I think it worked out pretty much in the end as best as it could. I ask you to kind of go back and look at it and see what the interaction between you and the board is, and see where we could make it work a little better. And as I said, I recommend that we get started much earlier and start looking at the actual numbers. So, thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you. Yes, I would echo the last couple of sentiments that the relationship, a positive, healthy working relationship with the finance committee is a critical element in there. We recognize that Ron inherited a very difficult fiscal environment, and speaking for myself, this is an area that we really would rely on his subject matter expertise to get us through that. But a relationship with the FinCom is critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yep, I'm good.
leaving?
I'm good. We're rehashing things over and over. Everybody's saying the same thing. So
Well,
what's
that's
pretty much.
we agree on a lot of things. That's a good thing.
That's what I mean.
Do
So
you want to
why?
start going down that way so Skip can actually?
Yeah, so we'll
I
let you
was
start.
thinking-
There you go.
Why don't we start with
Thank you for
Skip?
recommending that, because I was going to do that then, because
And we'll all
I don't
follow
want
your
anybody
lead.
to
I don't even have any. I didn't have got any of that paperwork. See, so I have no idea what the hell you people are
You
even
didn't get the
talking about.
review? You didn't get
No.
the review?
You got the review.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I
Did
didn't.
you check your email?
Now, you said something earlier about people and the way we communicate. All right.
Yeah.
You know what you can do with these?
All right.
We've had these
Okay.
problems. We've
I'm
had
gonna
these
move
problems
on.
with
Right.
computers.
I mean,
Keep
it-
going
it-
we'll talk about that. So Leah, instead, could you?
Yeah.
Well, I know that you had met with Ron to discuss the review in person.
Yes, I did my review in person,
Okay.
which is fine.
So, if I could comment,
All
because
right.
I think it's important. So as we said in the beginning, each of you have a different way to communicate. And the way I communicate with Skip is completely different than any of the other of you, because Skip comes in my office pretty regularly. And I update, and he asks me a lot of questions. It's more of a one-on-one personal conversation with Skip, or Mitch, with you, you're right, we're on the phone all the time. Lyndon is more email so far, but now because he's chair, we're gonna spend more time on the phone than we have in the past. So it is different, but Skip is literally comes in my office once or twice a week, and we spend a lot of time talking about things that are, that are on the table. So it's just different the way he approaches it than other board members might. By the nature of he's just not a computer guy, and that's fine. But sometimes he ends up, because he happens to pop in my office, he gets more detailed information on a particular issue than you might, because we go back and forth, he asks questions and stuff. So it's it's a different kind of communication that I think actually works pretty well, but I understand why it's different in the way we're talking tonight,
If I
you know?
can just make one comment. So if we can be sure to make sure that Skip has this, because I think at the final review, there's a scoring process and everybody's gonna need to score and there's gonna have to be, definite input for the end, so. you
I'd be
need
happy to make
make
sure he gets it, I gotta be honest with you, I'm a little baffled this time. Did you guys fill out a 6-month review for me? Cause I didn't get anything other than Jeff's, I didn't get any reviews from any, last time.
You commented
I got
on
comments
mine.
Yeah, you
from
commented
Yeah,
on
you
mine.
commented
Yeah,
on mine.
I sent mine directly to you, and you.
Yeah.
The 3-month
We
one?
had a call
No,
about
the
it.
6 month.
6-month
The
one.
6
months.
both.
This was all. This we're talking about the 6 months.
Yeah.
So
right
you must
now.
have did it over, well,
No,
a
you
month
was-
ago, a while ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I understand now, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I was
It
looking
took
at my
us this
box.
long to get to,
That-
it's
all right,
well,
now I
it's
understand
way
why.
overdue.
We're just
Well,
going-
and I know I'm teasing you, Skip, about the email thing because I know that you came in and you had the review in person with Ron.
We talked
So
about that.
yeah,
But-
it's certainly.
But I'm gonna back you up just a little. During the COVID, I had that lovely thing in the town gave me that didn't work half the time.
That's the-
And I got into so much trouble with that thing. And you did also with RDIC and some of the other people
Setting that up.
setting it up because every time, I'm not a computer person. I am not. And I'll be the first to admit it. I can text with my phone, and I can talk on my phone, but.
Well, I know that we did coordinate, and I do apologize. I mean, the
It's all right.
computer, the
Let's move
Chromebook.
on. Let's move
no,
on.
I know
We'll
that
be
we
here all night
coordinated
long.
getting you set up for that. I know that you would come down here sometimes and meet with Peter.
And I
just to
would
make
sit
sure
here
you
with
were-
Peter with
Yeah.
meetings.
But I guess I would just ask for the final review that maybe if he
Yeah.
communicates with Ron, you can actually write down between the two of you any comments so that we have a full review at the end of the year. I think that's
Okay.
important.
So maybe you just include a printed copy in our book, and we could just take it with us.
That's fine, I'm happy to work with him, either I'm talking to my office or give him a call on the phone, it's just, you say, it's the same thing, it's just different in style.
Or I could drop it off, but then I'll get
Yeah.
people yelling at me in town for dropping it off. So.
Yeah.
All right.
And the one the big scoring one is really at the end and that's the one that really is the one that matters the most, so.
Leah, can you move us along?
For
Thank you.
planning and organization,
Yes.
correct? Okay. So I think that Ron visualizes end results very well and anticipates a lot of problems that may arise to get us there. I think being mindful of where Rutland is in the process of kind of becoming a little bit more professional and at that weird transition of, still newish to a TA and everything, is trying to involve all the critical groups as early as possible into the process. And, you have, your vision may be very much a realistic vision, but we need buy-in from the important boards and commissions and stakeholders to get that vision to fruition. So I think getting buy-in as early as possible, and sometimes it's learning to read the people and reading the different dynamics of the groups, and sometimes it's planting little seeds and then, touching and going back and forth, and a little bit longer than just coming in and bam, it's going to be done. And again, some of that's just meeting us where we are as a town versus where we really truly probably should be. And so I think I appreciate the work that you do in this and kind of trying to push us to that next level.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of examples. Immediately upon coming in, you had met with CIPC and helped put together a 5-year budget, capital budget, with all the department heads. We ended up with a really professional-looking document that's going to help the town plan financially into the future. Not that we have money for capital items right now, but I think it's been good. I think there's been. I did notice, in having attended a lot of the different board meetings during this pandemic, you seem to be in all of them, and kind of connected the dots between different working groups. I thought that was pretty good. In terms of deliverables, there were certain deliverables like that 5-year plan that I thought were very helpful. You were sending regular end of the week updates, which I thought really helped us kind of understand what you had achieved that week, and I would like to see us kind of I know you've been on vacation, but maybe get back on track with those end of the week. That was very helpful from my perspective. Made for a great weekend reading. But that's it. Again, I think it's just an early snapshot. There's obviously a lot of different efforts going on to bring the town into compliance with some things. I know Leah's been working on the master plan. We're working on different aspects of that to kind of get the town up to speed with some of our documentation. So I expect that to kind of go in that same kind of direction moving forward.
We need to work with you, fine, it's for another time, but we need to work with you guys to take the facility management plan we're gonna review soon and put that into that 5-year plan. That's the next step of that process.
Good.
All right, so actually, I found the 5-year capital plan, I told you, I found it somewhat confusing. It looked more like an inspection of like what, was needed and repairs that needed to be done and just like different input from all different people. And I think it needed a little work. And I know one of the things I had mentioned to you in there, you had mentioned about getting a vehicle, and I know that when you spoke to us originally when you came on board, you were going to talk about getting a grant and stuff like that. And I think that should have been something that should have been included in there if you had some kind of
Well, it's in there, it's in
opportunity.
year 3, that's 3 years out because
Right,
there's no
but
big
it-
need for it,
But you were going to look into grants and things like that, so I wanted to see that as part of the plan. So obviously, I would want to look at some of those as priorities. What's the most important goals? What I am really happy about is the grants that you have gotten. As far as the community compact grants and looking at the development of the facility management plan and the pavement management plan. So I'm very happy with the success you've found in those areas. But I would like to see a little bit more detail and growth in the 5-year plan, and I would like to kind of see where you would be going as far as the vehicle and a cost effectiveness is, mileage versus having a vehicle with so many things to
I'd like
address.
to sit down with you about that, because I want to understand what you're looking for. Because truthfully, a 5-year capital plan is a list of wants and needs of departments. So that's what it is, but it's timed on the basis of priority and estimates and all kinds of things. But let's talk about something, what else you're kind of expecting from that. And we will put the facilities management plan into that as well to make it more detailed.
I
I
think
would love
more
to
my
sit
concern
down.
was the structure of it. It was very, like, everyone was kind of a little different. I wanted to
Yeah.
see more of a flow and like what the, so I guess
So let's chat more about it. I'd like to talk to you about, because we're gonna have to improve it, because that was my first pass at it, right?
Mhm.
We are gonna have to put the facility stuff into that plan as well, so, and also
Well,
there's
that's
some
going to
more.
drive a huge part of it now that you'll have this. So it like I said, it will grow. I just didn't
Right.
think what we've had so far was.
Well, it's the first step,
Well, yeah, it
so
was
we
pretty
gotta build it,
difficult
but
to
I'm
follow.
happy to, because there's also some, I don't call it fluff, but some other things that could be part of that plan that gives you, or gives citizens a more understanding of the whole thing,
Mhm.
and we could add that to it too. So I think that's gonna be, truthfully, I think you're gonna see over the next 4 years a real development of that. And then the big issue is how do we fund it is gonna be the really big trick. But at least now, we know what departments need, and that's a long way from where we were, because we really, when I asked for the capital improvement plan, I really couldn't find one. There was one in somebody's computer, but I never really got it. So this is a step-by-step kind of process, and it's a building process, but I think we'll get to where you wanna be. But I think and to be honest with you, it's gonna be like a 4-year process to get to where really we should be at the end of the day.
Mm.
So I'd love to work with you and continue to work with you on that as well.
Okay.
Jeff?
Thanks. So my 2 cents, my vision for an excellent town administrator, someone who is at the forefront of all community and the civic events. And I gave an example that, whenever we see Senator Ann Goby or Representative Kim Ferguson, we should also see TA San Angelo. They should be synonymous with each other. So my suggestion is to take proactive measures, try to identify any community events that are upcoming, and make your face a familiarity with the town on all of these things. I know you're new to the town, but moving forward, start to fold right into all the little things, Cub Scouts or whatnot. I think that's important to me as a representative of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, no?
No.
Move along.
Ditto.
I'm good.
Ditto.
Ditto.
Leo, we're moving on to leadership, problem solving, and innovation.
So I think for this one, I kind of touched a little bit on a lot of it already in the other pieces. My style's collaborative. I've said it a gazillion times. I think it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to need to get information from the subject experts, whether it's your department heads or whether it's going to the state level, or I know you've been doing a lot of reaching out to the other TAs in the area, and you took a big initiative working with the Wachusett TAs to kind of better understand the Wachusett budget and school system and everything. So I think you've done a lot for the leadership side and kind of taken taken the charge of things that I don't necessarily wouldn't have expected a new TA to the region to have to do, and so I appreciate that. And I think that you have a lot of innovation and great ideas, and again, it's kind of matching that with where we are and getting us to, as a group, to kind of, and I mean this as the select board, but also as a town, to kind of start making those steps forward. And I know that there's been some bumps and everything, and you know, I've had the conversation with you, like meeting us where we are, and not, that doesn't mean a free pass for everything, but it's just kind of willing to work with, because this is what it's always been done this way. So understanding that it's always been done that way, we're now a town 3 times the size of what we were when it started that way, and so now we need to kind of move forward and still be mindful that we want to support the groups and the individuals that are in town that are doing things. So it's that little bit of dynamic and everything. So
Thank you. No, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Leah said. I know in particular, like, for example, this week you worked with Julie on an issue at MMA, who is also a peer of mine at the City of Worcester, so it was good to see that you reach out to some of the surrounding TAs to bounce ideas off of them. I know we had that same issue with Juneteenth. You had reached out proactively to the other TAs to see what they were doing with the state holiday. Things like that. I think it's a good sign of leadership and bouncing those ideas. In terms of innovation, again, we've modernized some of our policies. You've looked for grant monies. We've gotten some of that. The concern I have, and I think what I'd like to task you with, and maybe what we'll talk about in our strategy session next, a lot of towns our size off of 495 with the demographic challenges we have are having the same financial difficulties we are. And how do we innovate? Or we're going to have to innovate our way out of it, because we're having to make decisions financially that are going to be painful for the town. That's really, I think, the biggest challenge of municipal government moving forward for towns our size and in our position without highway access. Again, we've seen some of that. You've talked a little bit about, I know, we were constantly putting out fires during the pandemic, but we had talked about the idea of agro-tourism. You've worked a little bit with economic development that you presented to the board in innovative ways to bring people into town and increase revenue. And I think I would be looking for that to move in the same direction as we move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, we had talked about your department head monthly meetings, and you've been doing that, and I think there's been a lot more open discussion during the meetings and stuff from what I'm hearing, and so that there's a lot of improvement in that area. The one thing I would ask, probably for scheduling purposes, you might want to say it's going to be a certain day, a time, a month. I mean, I know it won't be set in stone, but I don't know if you have a specific schedule of like first Wednesday of every month, or you know what I mean? So
we haven't been doing it that way, but
yeah.
it's a good
So
idea.
I have to have monthly meetings with my staff, and have done it for a million years. So I know the importance of having some kind of a set schedule. Not to say, like I said, there won't be times it will have to be rescheduled, but I think for staffing purposes, I think that it would be much more beneficial for them. And then as far as especially now as the chair, I'm going to rely on you very heavily on open meeting laws. I mean, you did training on that. It was great. So I'm always going to look to you for your expertise. State statute, if you don't know it, to find it. So I'm going to. One of the reasons that I supported you is your experience and your expertise in those areas. So I'm going to depend heavily on you being able to provide us with all the necessary statutes and. Like I said, state laws or whatever.
So if I could, Mr. Chairman, we just had a recent example of that on an email I just sent you with regard to open meeting law. Were you comfortable with the answers I got? Did you feel that I replied in such a way as you felt comfortable with the answer?
Yes.
So
Actually, if you want to review that, I think I have the video that I watched regarding open meetings, which I thought was very useful. I mean, I know you know it anyway, but I think it was beneficial for some of the information
well,
that was provided.
to be honest with you, I found it interesting. For instance, I learned that some commissions, at least one commission, maybe more, didn't take minutes of meetings, and that was part of my training. So I was a little
Right.
surprised. As as a result of that conversation we had at last selectmen's meeting, I sent another email to all my chairs of the boards and commissions, letting them know about that, because
Yeah.
I was surprised that fell through the cracks. And sometimes these trainings are going to take repetition, so they don't always grab it on the first bite, so to speak. So we got to keep sending the message over and over again. I
And some of
think that-
some of the discussion on during that training was with all the Zoom and everything now. We've actually seen that in the last couple of meetings, because this meeting, for example, listed as a Zoom meeting and not having access. So what you need to do if it gets changed, or if all of a sudden you lose access, or if they don't have video, and as far as the responsibility of the chair, recognizing the board who's there and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. So they do address a lot of the issues that came out through COVID. So I think it's beneficial to review that. And just some more of your strengths on the open meeting laws, that you've addressed a lot of issues. And then working with Central Mass Green Communications grants, community grants, that was a big coup too. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Jeff, you still there? Yep,
forgetting.
you moved.
Still here, thanks. So I guess I would harp upon what I just referenced, and what's important to me is a strong and respectful, very cohesive relationship between our TA and our town departments. People in these positions were hand-selected by our board, or the select board in general. And what's important to me is that departments and department heads have good morale, that they're happy, that they want to come to work, and that they have a great relationship, which goes both ways, between our department heads and our TA. So that's what's important to me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ditto.
Hold on, Skip, I can't write that.
Take a short and easy for you, dear.
Change up your word next time. For customer service and time management, I think, Ron, your time management is good. I don't see any issues time management wise and everything. Customer service, I think, can improve a little bit. I think sometimes it comes across as short and curt, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But sometimes I think, especially when dealing with the public, they're looking maybe for a little bit more information or to have a conversation, instead of just a, brief kind of quick answer and in and out. And I realize that some of that takes time, and you have to balance that with your time management and everything else that you have going on. So just being mindful that really we're in, and you've said this, I think, we are a customer service based industry essentially, and so just being mindful that sometimes when people come looking for things or have questions or problems, they may not try to understand what they're actually looking for versus just assuming that they're going to want X, Y, and Z and pushing it that way. So again, it's balancing that with the time that you have to afford to that, and don't be afraid to ask any of us or department heads, again, kind of seeking out the experts, or if you don't have time right away to address it, quick email, and then I'm happy to follow up, or if you want to have an additional conversation or something. So
Thank you.
I think I provided plenty of written feedback. I personally don't have any issues in either of these categories. I think they've been satisfactory in the small sample size we've had. I've heard positive things from people that have called, and of course, people that call and don't get what they want, or not the answer they're looking for, are gonna sometimes cause kind of a stink, and that's also happened too. But that has nothing to do with your customer service. It's more just the limitations of what municipal government can offer. So I think those areas have been fine.
Thank you.
Okay. I know, again, back when we first interviewed you, you talked a lot about your public interaction and stuff like that, and I think it's very important that you're out in the public. I know that during the vaccination clinics, I brought it to your attention, whether you had been there or not. They really hadn't seen you, so I think that there was disappointment there. I know you did you go there after the fact and make some visits, but I think that was very crucial. I mean, what percentage of the town went through that clinic? So I think that was crucial opportunity for you to actually be seen and not sit at every clinic, but I think that I would have liked to have seen you be able to take more opportunity to interact with the volunteers, the group, and the public as they're going through that process. I think that we still need to work a little bit more on your public image, so that people know who you are and what you stand for. I know, you participated in Ralph Anderson Square, the bench. So you've been to some big events, but you need to go to the little ones, to some of the different, at the library, the senior center, I don't know if you went to some of the races for the police. Some of those smaller events, I think, would be good to interact with the different types of generation, even some of maybe the summer fun groups to go and see the kids once or something. Just, I'd like to see a little bit more of that involvement with the public. And I did send you some information regarding performance management. Like I said, anything I pointed as like I wanted to see improvement, I tried to give you some kind of a sample of what might help you, and I wasn't telling you need to use that or the survey regarding staff, but I think that all those type of techniques are very helpful to address some of the things that I thought might be
And Linda,
concerns.
just, they were appreciated, because I ran through the ones you gave me. I was able to read through and kind of pick up suggestions and ideas along the way, so.
Like I said,
They were helpful, don't feel like they're not, because I like those, because it gives me a chance to see what I'm missing. So
and I appreciate, because I've seen little tidbits of things that have already changed. And some of the strengths, your work with the hearings for the Harbor Classics and meeting with the Collins Center. And, I'm not quite sure about what the Worcester Regional Transit meetings were, so I would like to know kind of what the benefit is to going to those. But I don't need a lot of detail if there's not a lot of detail necessary, but just the impact.
That's fine.
Jeff?
Yeah, thanks. So the TA's always been attentive and very respectful to me, and I appreciate that. I have no issues regarding the time management element, and can only assume that Ron's doing a great job with that. The customer service aspect during my time on the board, we had a couple customer complaints, and that was always uncomfortable to hear. And recognizing that complaints come with the territory, I just wasn't used to hearing that about a town administrator. So just for what it's worth, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I do want to make one little comment here. I go out of my way to be very positive with citizens. There's one area where you're going to hear complaints, and I'm going to be really blunt, is that I am a stickler for following, like for instance, building codes and bigger building regulations. So if my building officials tell me something's not the code, if a developer comes to me or somebody like that comes to me, the answer is you got to follow code. And sometimes, just so everyone understands, sometimes developers are not happy about that. Developers like to make money by not having to follow every single code. But I'm a stickler for following the rules, particularly as it relates to public safety. And I know that issue's come up at least on a couple of occasions. And that may not seem like good customer service when the individual involved might be upset. But I look at that as good customer service to the citizens who don't get killed, putting themselves in a risky place where building codes are not up to snuff. So that I'm just letting you know that that's one of the areas where, particularly in the building side, if you hear of a complaint about me, please reach out to me and understand, because I'm not an expert at building code, but I rely heavily on that particular group of professional staff, because that's really, in my opinion, a big public safety matter, is it meeting code. So you will never see me override any of my building commissioners, and I'm going to give you my philosophy, because I think it's critical for the town, is that all of my building officials, be it the building official, the fire chief, anybody, the health officials, they're all told that, listen, I want you to work with any of these developers, any of these businesses, I want you to go out of your way to help them, but I want you to help them meet the code. At the end of the day, they have to meet the code, or your job is to reject that. You know what I mean? So we want to work with everybody. At the same time, at the end of the day, they have to meet the requirements. And you can't come to me and ask me to change the requirements of code or to bend a rule. I don't bend those kind of rules. I think it's too dangerous to play games with that particular segment of our government. So I just want you to be aware that that's an area where, don't be surprised if you do get complaints, and those complaints are going to be based upon me following the strict rules of the planning commissioner, or building official, or health officials. It's just too dangerous not to, and it opens us up to too much liability. But it does cause a lot of unhappiness, because it's money for them,
Can I comment on that? So I 100% agree. I mean, I'm a rule follower, and I would expect that you would do it by the book. And I would never think that a complaint based on a policy, like we had a resident that was not happy of a policy we had and wanted to supersede that. So I 100% support
Thank you.
following the rules and support you in making those tough decisions. And that's what we pay you the big bucks for, is to
Yeah.
make those decisions.
It's not fun, but it's important.
I personally would never criticize you on that type of an issue. So.
Well, the problem is, truthfully, is members don't know. They just hear the complaint from somebody that didn't help them, and they don't kind of give you those details.
Yeah.
So that's why I just want you to be aware. If you have those people, come to me and we'll talk. I think you'll find that
pretty reasonable, but I'm a stickler for doing it
And
right.
we have, and they're, those types of complaints, having worked in municipal government for a long time, they're circular. It starts with the building commissioner and then the fire chief and
Yeah,
then
it
to
goes
you.
around.
And so you do get a sense of, sometimes, like I said, municipal government, folks sometimes don't get what they want. And again, that's not bad customer service. It's just a matter of letting folks know what we can and can't do, and how, if there is an issue with compliance, how to bring things back into compliance.
Excellent.
And Carol, if I may,
Yes.
I'm not taking a side either way on the basis of what those complaints are. I'm just saying it's awkward for the board to have to hear those. That was my own point, not about the elements of what it was about.
Thank you, Jeff.
Just so you know, Jeff, it's awkward for me too. I hate being in those situations because you want to make people happy, so it's awkward for me as well.
Exactly.
Okay. So last item is the technology competency.
So for technology competency, I said that I sensed that Ron came from a position where you had a lot of admin support and a lot more than we can generally than what we typically provide in the past have provided our TA here. So I think that it's just kind of, and there's been a lot of turnover with TAs as well as the admin assistants, secretary, everything. So I think just kind of the learning curve as to what works for all of us, our communication style, as well as the office itself and the organization of the office. So I think that sometimes for me, having the electronic versions is helpful, but having a version number or a date or something. So oftentimes I was, I would have in my email a few different documents, and it was trying to figure out which was the most recent or whatever.
Truthfully,
So,
we could have did a much better job during the finance meetings with versioning. We just didn't do a good job with that. In fact, even I was getting lost in what version we were looking at. So next year we'll work together, me and Karen, and do a better job of developing it, the versions and making sure it's documented better.
So I think some of it's that learning curve as to what works, and as we've discussed for the board, the five of us, we kind of all communicate differently. So what works for us also, I don't need printouts of every single version, but that's okay if people do, and that's totally fine. So I think that was my kind of big thing, was just that I sensed that you had a lot more admin support than what we initially were providing, and for better or worse, you know what I mean?
Thank you.
I think in this area, I think I gave you a score of satisfactory proficient, simply because I think this category is kind of arbitrary and really we don't have a big sample size. It's obviously been a different year with technology because of COVID, and a lot of our meetings initially, all of them were via Zoom. Prior to you arriving, like Skip had mentioned earlier, with those Chromebooks the town gave us are not really super useful, and it got to a point where, before meetings we would have to kind of coordinate to make sure everybody was able to set themselves up. I'm not super technically proficient either, but again, I don't think this is in terms of like technical proficiency. I thought everything was fine. The issues we've worked out, whether it's meetings or in this instance, now that you're here, helping the other board members get access. I know, Lyndon, initially you had some problems in accessing your email address, the new email address that Anita had set up, and we're all at different levels when it comes to technical stuff, and we all kind of work through those issues together. This is, if I had to put all of the management issues we're talking about on the totem pole, this would be probably the least important, given the climate we're in and the sample size we have. So, no complaints.
Yeah, yeah. So I wasn't really exactly sure of like where you are in technology. Obviously, you know how to use certain parts, different types of technology and stuff. Like Leah was somewhat mentioning, and you mentioned about the finance committee. So I would like to see more of an interactive technology being utilized, and I would like to see the budget being more public and being posted, so that the residents have the opportunity to really see what's going on with the process and in what there's, because they can request that information at any time because it's part
Should
of an
be
open
posted,
meeting.
as you said.
So,
I
yeah,
always
so-
post them in the past. I
Yes.
think you're correct. I don't think we did post it.
No,
should
it
be
wasn't posted, so I really would
Yeah,
like
we
to
need to
see
post
even
it,
the
otherwise
versions
not.
and stuff, so they understand what, what's going on with the process and stuff like that. So like I said, I don't know, like I say, what technology you're most comfortable with, if there's new types of technology, so it's something you may wanna look into, or even talk to Karen and see if, there's courses or there's certain programs and things that might be more beneficial for a better interaction, especially when it comes to the budget part of it. And part of it was on the training, and I really appreciated, you actually did, quite a few different training. You did the development and providing procurement training, COVID-19 training materials were presented, and you developed a presentation on the board and commission members regarding Robert rules. So you did do quite a few different little courses, which I think is beneficial, and I'd like to see that continue in different areas as needed. So with staff.
Thank you.
And if I just might mention too, if we can really encourage and make sure everybody realizes the opportunities through MMA, because there are a lot of courses, and I know especially, I've shared some information with Carol, but I probably didn't realize she's not connected yet with that, so making sure that the board and the other boards are familiar with what might be available, because it's a lot of free training
If the
there.
board members have subjects that thinks we should do some training on, let's say it's ethics or anything like that, shoot me an email, and I'll look at whatever board ideas you guys might have. I kind of hit on the key ones, the ones that were really important to get those done. But if you have suggestions of things you might want training on, I'm happy to do it, and it's very easy to me for, like, as you talk about technology, I'm pretty proficient in Microsoft PowerPoint and all the basic Microsoft suite. I was an IT project manager for a while, so I have a basic understanding of IT. I'm not awesome at IT, and I really need to learn our website.
Well, it changes so quickly. that
Yeah, and I
you can't
needed to
measure it,
learn
so.
about, our website, how to build websites. So I'd really like to build an economic development page to our website. So there's some things I gotta learn about our town hall web pages and stuff to learn how to use it personally. That has not been my big priority, to be honest with you, but it's something I need to do, because I think our website is okay, but I think it could use significant work to make it better.
Yes.
You know?
Well, we use the same format as almost every other community.
Yeah, as I say,
Like,
it's
we're kind
okay,
of
it's
locked in
workable.
a little bit to.
But
Yeah,
it's
they
not detailed.
vastly vary, so.
There's no economic development
I
page.
know the
You
foundation
could use
is,
it. There's a lot of people not posting minutes and agendas to their web pages. There's a lot of stuff that could be better. For instance, eventually like they put all the town contracts up on the web page. Information is Linda's saying, there's some information that's open government meetings. Why couldn't the union contracts be on the web page? Why couldn't?
Yep.
And he's right about the budget, and I apologize. I frankly didn't even think about it. I do it every year. We put it up, and usually it's done by our finance director, so I need to put it up. But I really want to explore and make some time to look at our website to see how we can improve it. It's okay.
I'll join you. if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
I'd be happy to
I
have you,
would too.
and suggestions, and we can sit and work together. What I need is actually to learn how to actually put stuff on the page,
Exactly,
which is what we have to do. And if you want to learn too, we can
I do,
set up a training meeting, we can go along and figure that out.
thank you. Jeff,
So I really can't speak to this category at all. I can only assume that Ron is doing sufficiently to do a fine job with technologies. Thank you.
and I know that technology is your thing,
Yeah,
so
sure
do
is.
you want
See
the
that?
last word?
Ditto.
Yes. See that piece of paper? That's the best way to communicate.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you all. It seemed like there was a couple of things I think that we'll be able to glean from the minutes later. Things that we want to improve on, and I think that we'll probably touch on them in
I
the
would just
next
ask,
session.
too, if you have a question or concern, or you think I should do something, shoot me an email. Let me know. I'm happy to look at those. As you probably noticed, if you shoot me an email, you can get responses as quick as 5 minutes. I mean, I try to be very responsive to your emails and get information. If you have suggestions, and to Lynn's credit, he sends me a lot of training stuff that it's frankly pretty nice to go through it. When I have free time, I bounce through and look at what he's done. So if you have something you think that might help me in some way, I'm always willing to learn and grow. And believe me,
Yeah.
I'm doing this a long time, but there's always stuff you don't know,
Thank you.
and it's kind of nice to look at it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Close this meeting?
This is good.
So, well,
Or just go-
we're in the same meeting, but
Yeah,
we
it's a
will take
recess.
a brief recess so
So-
that we can regroup for our roundtable discussion. We'll grab something to eat.
Do you need a motion to recess?
So, can I get a motion?
Motion for a 10-minute recess.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
but there's some common sense that just apply in Rutland. And you start off with the fact that we're just not near a highway transportation system, so you're not gonna attract the big manufacturers, the big wholesalers, the warehouses, you're just not. So now you have to focus on what could be your specialty, what kind of small businesses, what kind of things can you attract, and make that the focal, because
Right, but
And
what
it's
I'm
the-
saying with the survey that, because I filled it out, you already have some ideas that
For
people
the master plan
might,
survey.
might be okay with maybe pursuing. You've already got an idea of what the town itself might be
Mhm.
open to.
I think one thing we need to be mindful of it's important, and one thing we also need to be mindful of is the town doesn't have a ton of town-owned land, and we don't have a ton of already developed commercial space sitting empty. There are some pockets, but we don't have, Holden has different office spaces or commercial small retail front spaces that are available for lease and pretty essentially move-in ready, where we don't have that same network of ready to go things, which could be a good thing, right? Because we can.
I think part of looking at that, we should probably look at the zone, we should be looking at zoning as we're discussing economic
So there's a
development.
lot in
So
the
we're
zoning
really-
also for the.
to that question, right, for instance, and to answer Leah's thing. So I drive up and down Main Street and I see a lot of open empty land, but I don't even know who owns it or what they wanna do with it. And Economic Development Commission, one of the things I think they should do is identify what space is in the commercial zone, who owns it, and what do they wanna do with it. I mean, I don't know that there's not a lot of land that could be used for commercial development. It just seems to me there's a lot of open land I don't know who owns.
Right.
And I don't know if it's available for marketing or, I don't know. I mean, or if they wanna build houses on it, or if they wanna build commercial, I don't know what they wanna do.
So I think like assessing what's available, the zoning, the ownership, all that's gonna be part of so we can really look at where there is potential.
Yeah, so I just put ID available space
Yeah.
and I can put zoning, to me that kind of goes along with zoning, but I can
Right.
put zoning also. I know part of master plan is looking at zoning and making sure that we had the bylaw at annual town meeting to adjust some of the zoning and make sure that the zoning makes sense in the current climate, and having Dave George on as a planner has been a huge help because he can really guide that as kind of what's best practice and everything.
Well, especially like the downtown area here, I mean, I don't really know where it starts or ends or what, how much potential there is for any commercial, because even where there's a lot of houses, there's a lot of in-house businesses that could actually expand in the, the old ones where you have a business below and live above, and that could open up a lot more potential for a smaller, shops and retail stuff. I mean, eventually, if that's something we wanna do, more of a town shopping area as well.
Yeah.
So,
I don't even know if some of those residential units couldn't be convinced to sell if there was a commercial use for it. I don't know. I mean, it's been sitting there for years and years.
one of the things that the Council on Aging is doing every month on their newsletters, they're highlighting businesses in town. And they're not just promoting it, they're talking about the history and how it started and what it does. So every month they're highlighting business, and I think that's beneficial because there's businesses out there that none of us, a lot of us probably don't even know exist or what they do.
I'll tell you what I did in Southbridge, and I actually did a little bit enhance it too. I took the public access people, I tell them somebody would like Pete with a camera, and we would go out and we would ask the people about their business. You can't talk about what their prices are. How long have you been in business? Why did you do business? And then put it right on public access. And what I found is some of the people were using these short videos, because our public access guys put them in a nice little video. They were using them like commercials at their businesses. They were running it on their
Maybe,
TVs.
I know your time schedule is tight, but maybe have like a town administrator's corner where every so often you sit and you talk to a local business on cable.
Yeah, I was doing like 2 a month in Southbridge.
Yeah, I saw that on YouTube.
So,
Yeah, it's true.
so maybe we can implement something like that to just try to help create more awareness, because like I said, there's a lot of business in town that people are not aware of, and I think that we could do better at.
I think though, it's not just, it's also, and you had talked about this, you threw out that line that I liked when you were hired, 70% of your growth is gonna come from businesses that already exist. Now, you saw kind of a breakdown with a couple businesses when it came to zoning and compliance and what I thought I was gonna do this, and then fire chief told me this, and then somebody told me this. A streamlined process would hopefully prevent that kind of breakdown of communication from happening. And I just think now, again, with what happened with the Woo Sox potentially coming to locate, and then you and Dave did a great job in pulling out, these are the properties that are available that meet your size request. And Dave came in with the big GIS maps. Joe Buckley was there. And they were really impressed by that. But that original phone call for the phone tree went somewhere else, and they were told that you can't come to Rutland, doesn't want you here. And then, you know, parents are getting mad because it didn't come to any board or commission. So I think we just need a defined process to where if somebody calls the clerk's office or Beth, there has to be kind of this is the person you contact, and this has to be brought to the appropriate board or commission to make sure we can offer that support. Because some of that, that disconnect with like the existing business complaints could have been solved by just a 10-minute conversation with the right people in the room, and you know that because I think that's eventually how you solve it, you know? So.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, that's like common sense that George would be notified of potential businesses and opportunities like that. I believe he was tried to be contacted at that time, but we need to assure, right, that there's a process in place that people are directed to the right people, for the right purposes.
This kind of goes along a little bit with economic development, and I don't want to steer too much, but I was listening to the planning board meeting the other night, and there's a comment about planning board isn't really, they're not really set up to define the like long-term planning of the town, and I think maybe we need to better utilize Dave for that also, as far as not.
I gotta disagree with you. I mean, David's a great guy, but he's got so much going on.
I was
He
gonna
can't
say,
do it all.
we can't keep
He
piling. I
just
feel
can't
like
keep piling on him.
he's
Just
been
give
the
him the-
catch-all.
People have
Dave.
called him and he won't return their call because he's too busy.
Right,
He does have, you're putting a lot on his plate.
Yes, he's being buried,
right,
you know.
and so that was my next question is, who, is it, if planning board is not necessarily responsible for the long-term planning of the town, we obviously will have an updated master plan within the next, or parts of an updated master plan. Does that fall to us as
Yeah.
select board?
I think so. I think
Should
it's
we
gonna have to fall to
capitalize,
us.
but I think that maybe that's a little bit of a holistic, cause, approach also, looking at it from that macro lens as far as like, we've had a lot of residential growth and that's not going to end. And so how do we do it smartly so that we're utilizing all of town and being able to best attract businesses throughout the zoned appropriate places?
I think the towns historically struggle with that aspect. For example, like most towns that have updated master plans, they just go right back on the shelf and nobody looks at them again. And I think, and you know that's true too.
I just got done with dealing with it.
Yeah,
And I ended up
a
having
function,
to implement it myself.
like, the problem too is that if you look at take, for example, the adoption of RDIC in 1967 or whenever it was by the town, it's an industrial commission. Like that in itself is very antiquated because that's when the loom works was still open in Worcester. You had textile, you had heavy industry. That kind of business model in New England is dead. And so you're looking at like micro businesses that pop up here and there, different people's homes. We have some of that addressed in our zoning, but it comes down to zoning. But I mean, my fear is that, to your point, Leah, like if we do some long-term planning now,
It becomes
like,
obsolete.
it becomes obsolete within 5 years, and then you have entirely new boards. There's been a lot of turnover, and that's why it's been so difficult, I think, to manage.
Right, and I mean, I think we also need to be very clear that all these micro businesses, small businesses are fabulous. That's not going to be the cash infusion that the town is really
Well, that's correct too.
long-term looking for. It's definitely a help for sure. We're not dissing that by any means, but it's not this, long-term big infusion of cash or employees that are going to come in and then buy lunch and dinner and coffees that then we're getting meals tax and everything
Yep.
also.
So two things to that I would put setting up a process, which is the Economic Development Commission. I mean, establishing the Economic Development Commission to be the lead organization on this issue in developing, what they charge for what they have to do. And secondarily, something I started working on when I found more difficult than I thought is
developing a network of communication with existing businesses. When I came here, I didn't have so much as a single email of a business. I've been building it, but even the RB, what the Rutland Business Association gave me was terrible. And they took some stuff from the Chamber of Commerce, but we need to try to figure out how we can work to build a network of businesses to even talk to them, because we don't really have that. To really communicate what they need, how they wanna grow, you know, are they looking for space, are they not looking for space? Give an example, right now, even the storage thing is adding on a storage facility, and they're gonna be building more storage things up there, so. I mean, do we know that, how did I find that? I found that out because they were in planning, but they never came to me, never talked to me, so I didn't know that was even growing, right?
That's what we need a streamlined process.
We have a network, we have to know what the hell's going on, so we can build off of it, you know? And I'm finding out about it haphazardly through the planning commission, it's not the way I should know about a business trying to grow, right? We need to have that
Well,
process.
I think as far as that, I mean, I know that Dave sits in on a lot of those meetings, so just encouraging him to highlight projects so that make sure that you're aware, that he's reporting
What's
and
going
that
on.
you're aware that there's potential projects in the works, so.
And this is another, not to segue off of this yet again, but I've heard, and it's a recurring theme as far as communication among boards and commissions and departments and everything in town, and ways that we can improve that. We've gone back and forth historically with commission, or liaisons or not, and how that looks and everything. But I think that some of that is, you know, like reaching out to not only Dave, but also the planning board, their elected officials also, you know what I mean? And just kind of having,
Yeah. There's things that fall through the cracks. I'll give you an example. The retail marijuana thing we passed, we did a host agreement, right? So I'm working on the manufacturing one, because we did pick a company today, the same one as we did before, and I gotta work on a hosting agreement. So as part of a conversation, I'm in the meeting talking about the host agreement with my team, we're evaluating the proposal, and I said, well, we haven't seen anything from Chris Higgins, who's doing the retail place, we haven't heard. I don't know what's going on with that project at all, and I gotta reach back out to Chris and find out, you know, what's the timeline for that, are you guys working on it? We've got nobody to follow up on what are they doing, I did all the work to set them up with the hosting agreement, what are they doing, when are they gonna develop it, do they have a plan, do they have an architect?
Is there timelines on the agreements?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have to go back and look and see, but
I think
I know-
that's.
I just assumed that these guys were eager to do it, they're gonna keep
Right.
working on it, but I,
we had gotten an email forwarded, I think from your office around a couple months ago with an update from
Chris saying he
as
was
far as,
interested in
like,
anything else, but
but just kind of, this is the status of things and where we think we're
there's
going.
nothing before the planning commission, so they're all kinda like, where is it, you know? I gotta call Chris again, I'm gonna call him again tomorrow to find out, but like I said, the problem is follow-up, to we, truthfully, I'm not a full-time economic development director, so we gotta figure out how we can all work together and figure out how we follow up on all this stuff, you know?
So are you envisioning that if we do an economic development commission, that they would address some of these
We
concerns?
gotta have a
But
focus
that's part
on
of
it,
their,
yeah.
part of their charge?
Does
Yeah.
CMRPC have any sort of regional, staff person that can assist as far as, you know,
They
like,
do usually have consultants that will
They
work
have
with the
technical
town.
training, DLTA technical training stuff, right?
I mean,
Right,
you
but-
could just, like, why would, like, CMRPC, fine, but I mean, like, the state, you can call the state and they can provide guidance too, the Office of Economic Development, I mean, that's what they're there for.
right, no, I was
Um,
just,
It's just my fear, we're talking about a new commission, is my idea of this in working in economic development at high levels is to streamline a process. I do not want, and I think this is one of those commissions where you need to have folks on it that have the experience or that know the appropriate procedures. There's no sense in having another board or commission set up when it's full of well-meaning people, but people that really don't know how to address some of these issues, which is why I think Holden staffs it with 2 business members from the community
Mm-hmm.
and then 3 members of Peter's administration that can help guide the process. Otherwise, we're in the same boat we are now, where, you know, part of the issue, like Leah too, boards and commissions, they don't communicate, some I think because in some instances of communication is because we don't know how, or we don't know what the charges is or where those responsibilities overlap. And I think some of it is that old boys network of, this is my turf, I'm not gonna communicate with this.
That's what I said in the beginning.
And that's problematic, right?
well, I think some of it is like, you know, and I think we fall into this, like, well, we're always open, we have open meetings, they can come to us, and I think they have the mentality, well, we have meetings, they can come to us, you know, so I think some of it is just like a little bit of that turf war, but more, not necessarily turf war, but, you know, like, you should be coming to us, or I'm not going to you, you know, so.
And we have to
you talk
avoid
about
that.
that, like old boys network and stuff like that, and you know, we're always looking like why things aren't changing. But we have stagnant boards where we've had people on there that have been the same people for many, many, many years, and the same chairs for many, many years. And I know it's difficult to get people to get at, you know, involved in committees. But even if they went to another committee, somebody that's been on a committee for like 10, 12 years, 15 years, I mean, some people have been on there forever. How are we gonna see any change if we have the same people and we don't, you know, we're not trying to get some new, you know, new people in just to get new ideas? So do we look at like term limits and like, you know, have some kind of policy or something in place to say that people can only be on the same board for so many years and the chairs should rotate on a regular basis, whatever that is that we determine, just to assure that there's some kind of, you know, changes in the way that we're doing business? Because if, like I said, if it's the same people doing the same thing, when are we ever gonna see any change?
Well, and that's,
Oh,
you
sorry.
addressed that, if I may,
Yeah, go.
sorry. In, when you became chair, like, you know, we're gonna run things this way, and then I had, you know, made the sentiment where I think, you know, historically, this board in particular has usually rotated chairs every year. And it gets to the, I think that, to that point, a lot of boards should do that, because then it becomes an exercise of, if you have the same chair for 10 years in a row, that person's agenda is now dominating that board, and it may run contrary, and it may be intimidating. If you're on a board and you've never served on a board before, and you have somebody that's bringing their own agenda in for the last 10 years, you can be turned off by that entire experience.
Well, I experienced that with the finance committee, because I was the chair almost, you know, for like 10 years, and I had so much resistance. I had to really force somebody to take that position and say, look, I'm gonna leave. And they kept trying to hook me in, saying, stay, stay, stay. But I'm like, I've been doing the same thing for 12 years. This is not helping any. We need to have somebody else come in that might have some other ideas. And I think that's the same situation with all these boards,
Yeah.
especially the ones that have just never changed.
And I've kind of been pushing, and we never seem to get there, is we can all go on the website and go into each board and commission and see what openings are coming up and everything, but kind of in May, put together a cohesive list as to what the openings are that are front and center on the website. So the people are, Tamika and I were just talking about this a little bit in the break, as far as like people who aren't super familiar with town government but might want to become involved, you know, have a way to centrally look at what positions, what has openings, or what is
And
up for
really actually
reappointment.
promote a lot more, like what can you do for your town, and how can you get involved and really push it, not just like have an opening, and you know, try to do a little bit more outreach. Each board should try to do a little bit more outreach to try to encourage, to bring new members in. That kind of brought to mind, like when I went onto the website, before you would go onto a board, you'd go to that site, and then it would list the entire board and when they were expiring. Did that change, like contact, the name of the board, when they expired on the website? Cause
Oh, but I know what you're talking about, because I actually went on a couple days ago to check something, and there was one of the boards where there was nobody listed,
yeah,
but usually it is.
a lot of them are like that now, so I don't know.
But I don't know.
Historically, they had always listed every
Yeah.
board and when they expires and a contact, so if somebody
Yeah.
wanted to contact somebody on a board, there was some contact information available, and I don't know why that kind of got lost.
So that would go, I think, to maybe the next priority or next board goal is upgrading of the town website.
Yeah, because you guys have touched on that just a little bit.
Well, but we also, what we've also done is brought up what we'd like to see with the commissions and the boards that are appointed. So I think that kind of feeds into, I'd love to see an org chart. If you have a minute, I'm sorry, go to the Charlton website. Again, as we spoke, it's all the same platform, but there's many different skins and things that you can do with
Yeah.
it, and it's clear, it's concise, everything's there, and so I think it's something that we could
You know,
look
administration
at.
org chart, what kind of org chart?
I would like to see, I'd like to see everybody that's from the board and the town administrator and direct reports and dotted lines.
The town doesn't have an
and-
org chart, does it?
No,
You've
I
never
don't
seen it.
No,
think so.
you're actually gonna find,
We have an org
That
chart,
that's
I
gonna
found
be a
that
lot
in my email,
harder,
so I can forward it to
I
you.
think, than what you think. Because even right now, with Peter going through our existing bylaws for the boards and commissions, there's a lot of pushback because boards and commissions have different interpretations of what their actual responsibilities are.
Oh, a lot of pushback.
And this might come to the, I don't wanna say the old boys club, because I don't wanna give credence to that even, but, be that as it may, if we start, reminding people that have been there the whole time, I think there's good and bad autonomy, and I think that right now, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and that's been expressed here.
Yeah.
Everybody's off doing their own things, and I think it's time to kind of bring everybody home and
That's
figure out
true.
where they go, and
Truthfully, that was true of my staff.
do they need to
Shouldn't be
do?
polite, but some of my staff members were off doing their own thing, and they're not at all connected, and they liked past administration because they just let them do whatever they want. So the fact that they liked them wasn't because he was doing, in my opinion, was he was doing good, is because just left them alone. And that's not really management.
That's another area I'd like to bring out is
It's really
HR, and I know
Yes,
Mitch was in
that's,
his
I've got a
comment.
lot of HR and financial
Yeah,
stuff here. This,
Mitch had mentioned that, some of the things that Ron has started to do, but I, you know me, I've been pushing full tilt that there needs to be goals, objectives, accountability, so
Yeah.
there needs to be something in place so that we can, if somebody's not doing their job, then we don't have room for that, or if somebody's excelling in their job, well, maybe they could be, the water, facility, that they're worth educating
going back to
to
school, there's a lot
No,
of.
I know,
look
everybody's gotta go back.
look at the potential and then look at, what,
Well, and even as a basic, I don't even know who works for the town.
So,
And I'm supposed to kinda know that, and so there's no place to go for it for
So
one
I'm
thing,
gonna
but I
be
think it's
honest
also
with you.
like ragged, pulling them in.
one of the problems that small towns have is that HR is a big freaking job, to be honest with you. You could very easily have a regular person doing nothing but HR, and truthfully, it's become a lot more sophisticated than it used to be in the old days, because there's a lot of lawsuits involving around HR. So, I find myself to be pretty good at it. The problem I have is, I don't have the capacity to be an HR director. We're doing high-level stuff here, but not nearly what an HR director
Well,
should be doing.
like I said, I know that you've asked for goals and objectives from your
Yeah.
department heads. So the way that it's worked from my work is, you set goals and objectives for your department heads.
Mhm.
They should take those goals and objectives, and they should pass them on to their staff and
Correct.
give them and use the same, so it's a trickle-down effect.
Right.
And you make the head of your department heads responsible for the review and the processing of them. So
Mhm.
you're only dealing with your immediate staff, and then
Right.
making sure that they're addressing their immediate staff, so it's.
No, I'm just saying, what happens with me in terms of HR, most of the time that I commit to HR, and frankly, even here, has been funny, it's been hiring. We've done a lot of hiring and stuff. It's keeping my department heads trying to keep them on task to do the stuff they were doing, dealing with, employee kinds of issues, dealing with payroll kinds of issues. A lot of that is really, doesn't fall into the department. The only person that really helps with HR stuff is Becky at the Treasurer Collector's Office, does some stuff. But it's just, all I'm suggesting is, as much as I would like to spend mass amounts of time, I don't have the kind of time that really a quality HR
See,
department
you
can
know,
have. Because there's a lot of things you can do in HR.
This is gonna be a main theme, I think,
Mhm.
tonight, before we move forward at all. It's not the HR component, it's that some of the municipalities I work with, right, on a day-to-day basis, we have to do everything possible the right way to even function. Like, we're talking, like, even to get considered for funding, we have to have an open space and recreation plan, we have to have an MVP preparedness grant for CMRPC. Communities with money outside of 495, they don't care about any of this stuff, and they don't address it in some instances because they already have money. Like, so we're talking about like HR, like Ron, you're gonna have to make it work because you're the only person
That's
that's
what
there
I'm
to do it. And that's the thing, like some of these policies where we're trying to like become compliant with like state norms and best practices, it's something that I would love to see us do, but I mean, to the point, like, we don't have
We're not
an
there
HR
yet.
person.
Right.
We're not there yet, but we're gonna have to patchwork it because we're not even in a position to where we can onboard a part-time HR person.
And that's what I'm saying to you, I'm patchworking it, and I'm doing the patchwork stuff. I'm just saying, this is an area where it's very hard to get on with the detail, because we just don't have the capacity
Well, yeah,
of time and
and
staff
that's,
to do it.
it's gonna be the
So I'm
same
gonna
issue
continue to patch it, but
with economic development, for example, and upgrading the town website. We don't have an IT department, we subcontract that, and we can't afford anything.
Yep.
We, a lot of towns our size have a part-time economic development person, well, we can't. So Ron, here's 47 hats, you're gonna have to wear them.
Well, yeah, when you do what you
Or
can.
make it work with the staff.
And-
It's
and
just,
I
it's
know
gonna
it's
be a
not gonna-
constant theme.
It's not gonna be perfect, but, basically what I was saying is you need to delegate a lot more, but put the responsibility of your department heads for their own employees and let them, they need to be addressing that. So you shouldn't be having to address the whole scope of it. You should be working directly with your department heads who should be addressing any personnel issues for their departments.
And truthfully, they do. One of the things that I find, and find it with everybody, not just, even find among town managers, is that, you're supposed to use a progressive discipline approach in HR. So you first start off with, giving a verbal warning, then you do a written process. The one thing I find that department heads hate to do more than anything else is to document employee issues. So all of a sudden they come to a crisis with an employee, I wanna fire this employee, and they have no background documents to do it.
That's
It's your
exactly
own
why I'm
fault.
pushing this process. It's without trying to spend all your time doing it, that there
But-
needs to be at least some.
And I do talk to department heads about that, but it's just one of those things that's like pulling teeth to get anybody to document that kind of stuff, because they all wanna be friends with their staff. They don't wanna bust it way anyway.
But that's your
And
job.
I
That's why
know,
they're
I'm just
department
telling
head.
you, that's.
Well,
the
that's
reality.
one of the problems of a town this size too, is that everyone has existing relationships, and
No,
it's hard to make those tough decisions when it comes to people you know, and things like that, but.
And I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think some of our, a lot of our staff has worn many different hats throughout the course of their tenure here, and so they're oftentimes maybe hired for X position, but end up doing some of Y and some of C,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean? And just because we don't have the numbers that we need as far as staff, we don't have the funds to staff, and so some of it I think is goals and objectives, and I also want to caution that we need to be mindful that I think there's some staff that are doing a lot above and beyond what kind of they would fall under their direct goals and objectives, and what happens if we start holding them very hard to their goals and objectives, and we lose their willingness to kind of help out elsewhere, like.
and there are key department heads that go above and beyond what they have to do, Joe Buckley's a perfect example of them. You can ask Joe Buckley anything, and he'll try to help you. Becky's been the same way, and she's willing to do things not really in her job scope. So there's some of them that are willing to kind of go up.
Well, like I said, that's, you wanna recognize the ones that work above and
Right.
look at their potential.
Yeah.
The other issue is, like I said, morale is huge, and where we're not doing cost of livings for some, but people that are on unions get them, and this, so many things going on. If you have a non-performer in your face and nobody's addressing it, and you're not getting your cost of living, and you're not getting any kind of support, that becomes a huge issue. And so it needs to be addressed, and the only way it can be addressed is if somebody sits down, tells them they're not doing it, and makes them accountable and documents it.
Yeah, we just got done doing that with one of our employees, and I can't talk about now, but, we are finding, those employees who have weaknesses, we're trying to make it clear that those weaknesses can't continue. And it's just.
I have a question, so if we have, say by some miracle, somebody is retired, but they're not completely ready to just be done, and they wanted to come in, they have some HR experiences, and they're going to say, I'll give you 10 hours a week. Are we, for nothing? I said it's a
That's-
miracle,
That's
I
gonna
said
be
it's a
that's gonna
miracle.
be a labor law
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
He's right, you
So you
can't
can't
just
do-
do it now. Either they're an employee or they're not an employee. Especially in HR, you can't take volunteers in HR.
Okay,
What we do use is a little bit of the senior tax credit program to do a little bit of that stuff, which is another program we need to evaluate to see how it's benefiting us. Although truthfully, it's one of those programs that's not as much designed to benefit the town in terms of work you get as much as it is to help a poor senior who needs a tax break. But we use it to try to get some benefit out of those employees. And sometimes you get some employees that are really good. Some of those senior people are like, oh, those are not so great.
I know one.
Well, that kind of reminded me when we were talking about whether we would look at, like the aging of the committees and the boards with the same people. I've been on a lot of committees, and typically what you do is you go off and you be like an ex officio member, so you don't lose all your expertise, so you have an advisory capacity, so somebody that's been on the board for a long time could still participate, but in an advisory capacity, and help that board develop, so you don't leave somebody hanging, because like we said, everybody's kind of like, I don't want it. But there's, so that you can actually kind of make it more of a transition and still have some change. So, I mean, that's something to,
And I think a little bit is if it's the expectation that chair, you know, the officer positions are hopefully rotating periodically, then you're going in with that expectation that it's at some point not going to
Some of
be
the HR
person.
stuff, things that I've worked on in the past, I'm reinventing for us, like the sexual harassment policy, the harassment policy. I think probably we could, as we look at the website, we gotta look at a technology policy on using how you use town technology, and you shouldn't be shopping on it, you can't look for it. And I did one of those, and Hanson actually has a really good one, so we can take from the town and revamp it to us. You know, I'm trying to take things that I've seen in the past, the noise, I think Skip was asking me about a noise ordinance and stuff, and trying to reset this up for us. And again, I'm all for the HR stuff, I just wanna be careful that
It
you
can
don't
become
expect me to become an
all-encompassing.
HR director, I just don't have the capacity to be an HR director.
you mentioned like the sexual harassment and some of the mandatory trainings that some of the boards and staff have to take. And I know Anita tracks a lot of that, but I think we have to take more of a hard stance, because if it is a requirement by the state that certain people take ethics and certain training, we need to decide on taking some kind of action, because if somebody doesn't comply to that, then we have people that aren't doing the training that's required, and I think that becomes an issue.
To build off that point, that's a great point. I actually did have a couple constituents reach out to me this week, and the same type of constituents that like to catch up on the meetings on cable access, and they were appalled at how some of these meetings will run, and some of the comments made during these meetings that were seemingly innocuous, but the individuals were upset. And I know that we had the training on Robert's rules, but I think we, and it's probably under our purview, should do a better job of making sure that our boards and commissions are following a certain procedure on how to run meetings, to make sure that the chairs and vice chairs understand how that should be done. And also to understand that I think we all have to be cognizant that public comments they're being taped and rebroadcast, and I think we need to perhaps revisit some kind of training as to basic meeting
I
decorum.
think you can get free training, so you can have somebody come in and do an actual in-person training through MMA, I believe.
Well, you can
I
do
know
it through the
I need-
open meeting law too, I mean, the AG's office, the AG's office will actually
Yeah, they'll
provide
come in and offer support.
So we
office
should-
training, and I talked to 2 or 3 people that you're talking about that particular complaint I've already dealt with, but
Okay.
I understand the issue very well, and I've dealt with 2 of the 3 issues raised. You know, the question of, and some of it's frankly just regular decorum, how you run a meeting in a polite, decent way.
Yeah, I think that was the
and
crux of the
stuff,
issue.
and you know, sometimes it's hard to teach people just good common
We do-
sense.
We
No,
do
but
have
the
a
thing is they have
policy.
the training, and then, like I
And they
said,
have no
if
excuse.
if it's mandatory, then they need to be held accountable for it. Then, as far as I'm concerned, if they're not doing the mandatory training, they should not be participating in that board until they've met required training.
To tell you who can help me, and I gotta tell you, I've been extremely impressed since I've gotten her. And Beth was new, never had any experience in local government. In my opinion, I don't know how you guys are working with her, she's been phenomenal in how fast she's learning.
Oh, she's
I
picked
think-
up quite a bit.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, the person before was good and very knowledgeable, and Beth didn't have near the knowledge of her coming in, but she's been phenomenal, and all my staff loves her, and she does good work. But eventually, as she kinda gets more trained to the job she's doing, I'd love to kinda increase her capacity to do more HR stuff, because she can clearly do it, she has the capacity, so she maybe help us and help me to do more on the HR side as we go along.
So doesn't NNA give us credits every time they come out here and give us a class and show us
On
stuff?
certain things, if
So-
employees go to it, but they also have, there's also a, it's like an HR group of HR professionals where you
Yeah,
can
but
send
that, you
people
didn't get where
to,
I'm coming from. If we go with our insurance company, we get credits and our insurance goes down.
for certain types of training, correct?
Yeah.
Because it reduces liability
Yeah.
Yeah,
of one of
right.
us doing
That's
something
exactly right.
stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's the same thing, like if we attend MMA and you get credits for
yeah,
attending
same deal.
certain,
Yeah, go.
Yeah.
but I know that if you
Yeah.
have additional training and, or, you know, certain groups in town do certain trainings or whatever.
Because
it's-
particularly liability insurance gives us stuff, and if you teach people out at DPW how to lift in a certain way, it reduces our liability insurance. There's a lot of that stuff that MMA does, so yes.
Well, we should be starting to push that.
Ways to
Police
decrease.
driving their
Is
cruisers
Julie
and
still,
all that.
Julie's still the head of MMA?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
she's
she
local
just started.
too, so.
She's great, yeah.
Yeah.
Before I came here, I met with a regional group of managers, and Julie was one of them.
Yep.
So Julie was organizing meetings, so I went over there, and I frankly have decided to stay with that group. So I'm still joining their meetings because it was such a great group. And I meet with the ones in this area too, but Julie's the leader of that group.
Yeah, so we should
Plus she's the
definitely,
leader of
we should
MMA.
take advantage then of those more opportunities to do that.
More training, although,
Now, I know we don't have a ton of things, but I think we've actually keep going back to a lot of the similar type items, so I'd like us to try to, unless somebody has some other hot item they wanna add to the board.
I-
No,
And then,
I think this is a good list, but I also think, like, to be honest, like, the HR component to me is about HR, but it's also about, like, my big thing is in a year where we're fiscally lean, but we do have a town administrator with experience, and you have a board where it seems like we're agreeing on a lot of these priority issues, I view HR as kind of bringing us up to our policies and procedures where they're within best practice. And I want to see if we can agree on emphasizing that, not just in HR, but across the board, and what Cimarron's already been doing with those different policies and procedures about, here's social media, here's communication, here's what we're going to do about Zoom meetings, to make sure we get those things on the books, because as you know, in talking to Peter right now, going through bylaws and everything else, there's a lot of holes that we have to fill as a town in terms of policies that we don't have written anywhere.
and I'd like to see these policies.
I saw a pained look on your face.
well, because I'm thinking I developed a communication plan in Southbridge, and I'm sure it's on Southbridge's computer, but I don't have it anymore. There's a whole communication plan. I spent a lot of hours citing things like that, and I remember some of it, but I wish I had it. That's why I was my pained look was.
I'd like to see us have like
Reinventing
one
it.
site, like either, whether it's off the town administrators, that where all these policies and procedures, HR related and
Yeah.
similar type ones are all in one spot where somebody can go and they can look something up or refer to something easily when it's a,
That's the expansion of the website, because we have the policies, just a matter of putting them on the website. So that's an HR page we want to develop, so
Yeah.
that's something we should talk about when we're looking at the expansion of the webpage. They say I want to do an economic development page, a
One
policy
thing
page,
I would like, sorry.
financials
No, go ahead.
page.
I was gonna say, one thing I'd like to, we touched on a little bit at the beginning, is that long-term health, financial health of the town. And we know we have some big projects in the pipeline. We don't necessarily know 100% what that tax money is going to look like until it's realized. And some of that's not gonna be realized for
For years.
years.
Or if it is realized at all.
Right, I mean, and,
Pessimistic, that's what it
Being a realist.
is. You're
and,
pessimistic.
but it's not an instant fix. And so the next, I think, I would venture to say 5 to 10 years, 5 years for sure, are going to be could be very, very, very tough. And what does that look like? And what would it take? Is an override totally never
You're
going to?
you're never gonna get them to do an override, because when they see the school has the right to come and want 3.5%, 5.5%, 6%, and
Six.
we only go up 2.5%, let's be real. They're gonna say, wait a minute, the school has got all our money, we're
But-
gonna move out of town, and we're gonna, they're not gonna go with it.
And so I guess and I've heard from a lot of people saying that, the school just gets all the money, what does it take to what can we do? Because the school's going to continue to take
An
whatever the
override.
money,
Yeah.
and we're going to have to continue to cut services and cut services and cut services, and that's what I mean, the hard conversations. What does it take to?
Do you remember 4 years ago, we passed an override for town services
Yeah.
and whatever? School came in and took it. Poof, took it right away from us. And we're in the same position as we are right now.
I think, to your point, Leah, and this is what's tough, right? Because, out towards where I work, Hopedale was in the same issue. And they tried 2 overrides in the span of a year, similar to kind of what we did, and they both failed. And they're in the same boat. And I don't think, again, I want to make it clear that I don't think the school's being malicious in their request. I think it's the nature of education funding. But, like, to your point, what are we going to do in the next 5 years? I mean, this is tough because the projects that Ron are talking about, like, let's say the Heights property, or if there's the marijuana facility. The Heights property, the majority of that money is going to be one-time revenue, and then it's going to be tax levy that comes in off the properties, but that's going to be used to support everything else that has to come along with it too. We're going to be in the same position moving forward, so we really have to. It's a tough economy because if you look at like our demographic flow, people that are moving in, you have people that, on average, our median income in this town is much higher than the state level. You have people that expect a certain type of services, but our town budget can't support those types of services, and you're going to see that
I keep
fight.
hearing it. At some point, people got to come to recognition. You get what you pay for. If you don't want to pay for the services, unless you somehow change the school agreement, you have to pay for a certain amount of services. You
Well,
just,
and
at
that's-
some point, we can't keep
I guess that's what I'm
just
saying.
slashing our services.
I
We
don't
just can't.
think, like to Leah's question, I think this year, as tough as it was, is not going to be as difficult as next year because you know the school, to reduce the ask, used a one-time E&D funds to reduce that ask. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year that request came in at 8 or 9%. And what are you going to do? You're going to use free cash or one-time revenue that we should be using for capital infrastructure to balance that
Let's
budget
be
out?
clear, because I don't want there to be a mistake. You're absolutely correct. They used one-time revenue from their account. You know what? The reason they did that is because they had the money from this year's budget was gonna go right back into that account. They took $1 million
Of course.
of excess money, so that account didn't go down a dime, I bet. Probably got more money in it because they had way more money in this year's budget than they spent
Mhm.
because of COVID. So that reserve account never lost any money.
Sure.
But you're right, they used one-time
you know
revenue
what?
balance, so they're gonna lead
Politically,
us into a problem next year.
politically, the way the agreement's set up is we get steamrolled every year.
Yeah,
And
it's
to be
great.
honest, if I were the school district and I knew I could roll over you, I would do the same thing.
I know, and
That's
I
what
can't
they're
find
gonna
a
do.
solution to stop
And it has,
it.
again, it's not malicious,
Which
it's
is
more just,
aggravating.
you need several towns to fail it, and it's not, I mean, Holden, in all accounts, is gonna have to put an override on their budget this next year, which they tried really hard to avoid this year. Everyone kicks they wanna kick the football down the road. It wouldn't surprise me if we also had to try another override next year because of the same issue.
And I guess that's some of my, like, wanting to have the honest look at the long-term financial health. And some of that is, hopefully trying to work more closely with the district. And I say the district, the district administration, the school committee, and the 5 towns, and some of the grassroots organizations that have really advocated at the state level to reimburse for the regional districts, up the transportation reimbursement. That helps. I mean, it's not a be-all,
Yeah.
end-all. We know Senator Goby and Representative Ferguson are on our side. It's just we're outside of Boston. We don't have the population. So is there a way that we can it's going to take a lot of different pieces, but can we
So-
try to be more kind of whole about it
So we took,
in some sides?
we took a really whole look at it from a 5-town basis this year. I met with the town manager and administrators regularly on this, and that's why I really feel we went from 961 to 400 or something. Matter of fact, I got an email today from Peter in Holden, who gave me who the town representatives are gonna be to the group that we're forming, which effectively is gonna be a select board member from each town and a town administrator from each town. And Mitch has already kind of accepted that position. So he had a list of those, and I said to him today, do you want me to set up a meeting of all the town managers, administrators to, because he wants to go, where do we go from here kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about that. Peter may even respond to me today, but he'll respond to me tomorrow, and we'll set that meeting. So I get the approach, but the approach we're taking is really one of just applying pressure to the school committee because we can't change that school agreement. So all we're really doing is getting the towns together to apply pressure and get them coordinated to work on putting, some pressure on that board. The problem is the underlying agreement, I think it's almost damn impossible to
It's
change.
even not, unless you can put a stipulation in the agreement that they're not gonna ask for more than 2.5%, which you can't.
We're gonna do that, the school
the
committee has
agreement-
to decide they bring that to town meeting, and they're not gonna bring
The
it.
agreement itself does not change, to Leah's point, how education is funded and how the state reimburses some of these costs. So I mean, it's something that's going to be passed on to the towns regardless.
And I don't think that that's a be-all, end-all, but I'm just wondering if there's ways that we can work together. Instead, it often feels like it's a town versus district because we're put in that position.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of us have kids or have had kids that have gone through the district and, you know, value the importance of education and also value the importance of our town services. And so is there a way that we can work towards the funding side of things at the state level? It's not gonna solve all of our problems, but
I'm telling you, Leah, I went, in my opinion, to extraordinary levels this year to talk to the school system and ask them and tell them that we couldn't afford an increase, right? So I told them they could not give us more than like a $400,000 to $500,000 increase in their budget. And then we went to a roundtable discussion where
I know.
every town said, we can't do it, and then they came back and told us we were assessed for 961. I almost fell off my chair of just how little it meant what any of the towns said to them. They just completely ignored all the opinions of the selectmen and the town administrators in every town and did what they wanted to do. So when you say it's us versus them, I guess in some ways I can't say it is because they just don't care what we think. And I've never seen anything like it before. I never.
To more
Look at
directly,
your interview.
Well, that's what I said. I never imagined that you could have that
I
kind of
think
a
your bigger
situation.
question is whether we should take more of an advocacy role in working with these partners to try to reduce those costs. But like transportation being one small bit of it, I don't think we like if you actually look at the DESI numbers and the issues that education is facing now that didn't exist 20 years ago, it's not something that advocacy is going to change.
it's not gonna fix by any means,
No.
no.
And so I think the cost issue on the municipal side is going to be the same. And I hate to say it because I would never agree with this in principle, but the reality is that if you have residents in town that are coming in, these are families that are, you know, more affluent than the median average, not particularly a diverse population in terms of demographics that would lead to more reimbursement from the state for different things. If people value both town services and school, then we have to give them the choice of paying more for those services, or we're going to have to continue to cut services. I mean, that's
And I think that we need to be very clear and upfront, you know, about what that's going to look like. And I think that this year is a wake up call for some people. You know, I had, after the override failed, I had people calling being like, can't we revote and vote it as town services because we thought it was for the schools because of the way the question was worded. And so I think we need to be very clear as to how we're presenting the information and
Well,
not
I mean,
coming
to
at
Skip's point, it was because that's exactly where it ends up. It's always going to the school. So I know it affects town services, but the reason for the override was because of the increase over the school. And so it was worded correctly because the override was going to compensate the school.
Right.
Because the departments weren't receiving that increase.
but the departments were the ones that received the cuts. And
Because
so
it pulls it, because when it doesn't pass for the school, it pulls it out of the departments.
because we as a town aren't the only ones able to decide the school budget. You know, the 4 other towns had voted in favor of the school budget, so that money was already gone. You know, like
well, no, we didn't know because the other town meetings were actually after ours.
by
and
the time it went to vote
to the ballot,
to the
right.
ballot,
But we had to make the wording choice.
exactly. No, I'm just saying. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that.
The funny part is the reason the towns ended up voting for it is because we put so much pressure on them, they lowered the amount to a point where the towns could vote for
Well,
it.
that's what they do.
That's what they have.
They play it, all the players.
They sharpen their
Yes,
pencils.
They know exactly.
Right.
They've never
That's
sharpened
the
to
term.
the degree they
What I
sharpened
did not
this
expect is Paxton do $600,000 in free cash to balance their budget in the situation they've been in. So, I mean, what can you do if they're willing to go to that extent? What are we ever gonna do?
They do that every year. I called her up and I said, because I saw that, it was like, you know, the 600 something free cash. I said, how could you use that much free cash? She said, well, our finance board and board of selectmen, that's what we do every year. We give them almost all of our free cash. We have no money for capital stuff, but that's the way we
See,
did it.
that's what I don't
My
understand,
favorite
because the
answer.
infrastructure in all these towns within the district are horrible.
Yeah, well, that's
And
why.
they're not gonna improve with this
See, and that's
Why?
this is concerning to me because I went to the last FinCom meeting and briefed the board about, because I am part of that subcommittee for the district agreement, and we talked through the district agreement, and Pete, I think, gave a pretty impassioned speech about a situation his family had gone through, where this is actually, it's getting to the point where, like, for example, last year we had a CPR compression machine to purchase for one of the ambulances. We have 2 ambulances in town. One had it and one didn't. Now, if you have both ambulances deployed at the same time for emergencies, you could have a drastic differently health income or outcome whether one ambulance arrives versus another. And when we're putting off capital purchases where you're having to make a decision between someone's health outcome and the education of my child in the society of abundance in which we live, like, it tells you that something's broken on the funding side. And it's going to be a real struggle. Like Paxton, we have a crumbling infrastructure. Look at our town buildings. Look at this building. And you can't put any capital money in that because that free cash always goes to balance the budget. And I don't know what the solution is, but like the long-term conversation, I mean, you're not going to change education funding, so it's either going to have to be an increase in revenues, which means taxes. You're going to have some one-time revenues that could help float the issue and kick the can down the road, but it's not a permanent fix either.
So,
It's a horrible fix.
has anybody ever heard of anybody currently lobbying the state? Because the fix is, you can't increase the school budget more than 2.5%, like what you said. We have it,
But
we're
they
stuck at
look at
2.5.
the fix, they know what the fix is.
But
In the state's opinion, the fix is you have an override vote, or you can vote it down, or you can do, those are the fixes. It's
But-
not the
but
state's fault
it's-
that we entered into a stupid regional agreement that
well,
gives all the power to the region.
but
That's what we did years ago, but that's what happened.
But what I'm saying is if they've implemented that you can have to do with 2.5, no more than that, and you can go up to whatever, because the state has, what is it, 6.5, 7% or something, that the schools can go up to, I mean, right there, you're so off balance. It's only gonna take a couple of years to get into the mess that we're getting into, and it's never going to.
Well, it doesn't matter. I don't think what I just believe is like if you look at the DESI numbers and what education has become over the last 20 years and the needs of students, that I don't see that ever becoming an issue that's fixable, because there's just the level of services that are needed now are so astronomically high, and there's so much staffing and personnel that you can't get away from.
And-
I hear you, but what I'm gonna
Especially-
counter with is that as much as we know that the district inflates, who's to say that DESI hasn't inflated, that they assigned things, so that, I'm just saying, this
The
is,
state
this is
has
me
caused a
being,
lot of
Yeah, I mean, the state's caused the
skeptical.
issue, but I mean, if you look at the actual stats when it comes to like the services being provided to children and like the faculty to student ratio and what those recommendations are. I mean,
and they
those are
set,
just-
but they set the payroll too,
No,
so,
but those are
right?
statistics though. I mean, like if you have 130% more kids that have IEPs this year than that did 15 years ago as a percentage, that requires certain staffing, that requires
Mhm.
certain
Yeah,
attention.
but they get more money for that. They get a lot of money for those. when they
The state
want.
gives more money, but they don't pick
Yeah,
up the
but
whole
it's not,
cost.
the whole cost
Doesn't
of
pick up a piece
everything
of the
backed
cost.
in is not backed by the state. I mean, that's,
I mean, I disagree. I think that they make more money on that. I think the opening remark for when they had a new principal at Glenwood, when my wife worked there, is in a perfect world, everybody would be an IDP because they were getting money for it. It's definitely a
See,
moneymaker. And
it's
my
not a
wife
moneymaker.
worked on one on special ed, and they're not getting like tremendous services. They're getting a lot more money than the services they're paying for, in my opinion.
see, I think that that's a generalized comment, and that doesn't reflect on the entire educational system. That's just an anecdotal experience. I don't think DESI is maliciously pulling funding from communities. I think that there's a real genuine interest in providing a product to kids in a changing social environment
Well, I think the
where it's
intent is
needed.
there, but whether they get it, I mean, the same thing, like the expenses keep going up. A lot of it is administrative costs. Outrageous salaries for the superintendent, the assistant superintendent. You have students going to school, they have to bring every single one of their supplies. They're not even really barely paying for
But
supplies.
again,
The
that's,
books aren't being updated, so I disagree. I
that's
don't
not
think that the
factually
money's
correct,
coming.
though. If you like, our superintendent for managing a district this size actually makes less money than some of his counterparts, and you can argue that that's still too much money. But if you look at our administrator to faculty ratio and our faculty to student ratio, it's in line exactly with state standards to make us competitive. So I don't think that I mean, yes, in a budget that size, there's going to be bloat, there's going to be line items you can shift around and play with money, because you know as well as I do, with a budget that size, you're going to move things around, and it's not exactly going to be spent the way that it's presented. But like if you actually look at the numbers being presented from the state on our district, there's nothing you could, because I've gone into this budget season saying, what can I pick out of the DESI reports that we can ping them on for being excessive? It just doesn't exist. It's not there. I mean, look at our class size and everything. It's comparable, if not bigger, than our state peers. We're just in a poorer region of the state than like a Newton,
We're-
Cambridge, or Braintree.
We're poorer, but not poor enough to receive the additional funding. And
Correct.
And we're getting, Rutland is very quickly becoming a wealthy community where the houses that are being built and sold are what? $400, $500, $600, $700,000 homes now.
Yeah.
So we very quickly lost that kind of
Identity of what it was 20 years ago.
right, and this is kind of going way off, but I think, I don't have an answer for this, but I think it's something that we need to keep in the forefront and not solely focus on, I think sometimes we get so focused on the current budget year, and then it's like, oh crap, what's gonna happen down the road? And I think we need to do both.
So that's why the committee, Peter's forming a committee so that we look at and try to figure out a long-term strategy for this. So that is the purpose of the committee he's putting together. I just don't know how they're gonna find a solution, but that's the concept. Look at how we deal with this, not just at the budget year, but ahead of time,
I mean, this is the struggle of municipal government of our time. Everyone that's outside of the 495 belt or within Route 2 is dealing with the same exact thing.
There's even communities along Route 2 that are that are struggling because they are bedroom communities, and they don't have, even though they have the highway access and everything, they don't have the commercial draw that a 95 Route 2 interchange have or something. So it's I don't have any answers, but I think it's something that I would like to keep in the forefront of all of our minds, and whether that's, we say we don't want another board or commission, but whether that's, a representative from select board, FinCom, planning, kind of economic development. I don't know how it looks, and I don't know what the outcome is, but I just think it's something that we need to be having very real and honest conversations. And
So I mean, I think we can all agree the school's always gonna be top on the list on how we're gonna be able to manage the impact it has on the town. But, so I think we've kind of got it.
So I have economic development, kind of the whole thing, a process, a commission, that includes, IDing available space, zoning, promoting existing current businesses, defining and streamlining the process, networking existing businesses, follow up. And I kind of put here, but I think this goes to kind of everything, proactive approach. We need to really be proactive and intentional about things, and less reactive or just kind of sedentary and hoping something's gonna disappear.
Well, like one of the things I had mentioned about us starting now and starting to look at the actuals and the way that the money was spent on a quarterly basis, I think will help us to going into the budget season with a little bit more knowledge about exactly where the money's going and what would be the best steps.
So the computer system allows for instance, a quarterly report of where you're spending to date is every quarter. So, I mean, department should be getting that already. Where you really start focusing on, the way we end up doing is we usually start focusing on really when you get close to last quarter, because then you're worried about going over budget or what departments are gonna have extra money, which departments you're gonna take away money from. Because the quarterly budget's gonna, the first quarter is just gonna show you what payroll you used to date, how we have $1,000 in for, I don't know, HR or whatever, and it shows you only spent 200 so
Right, but
far.
if we start the process, because then at the end of the year, there's gonna be end of the year expenses, but there's also gonna be departments that are gonna spend the money. And is it really, yeah, just spend the money so they don't lose money.
Let's go.
That's what they do.
That's the way, that's the way the
Uh-huh.
budgets go. So I think that if we continue to kind of review it and see where the money's going and how it's being utilized, I think it'd be helpful in going into the budget
Yeah.
season, so.
So just, I do look at that currently but I will also admit that my biggest focus is on the last quarter, because that's where I'm worried about over expenditures and, and move money around, and I wanna see, and departments do it, although I gotta be honest with you, this sounds pretty good. Sometimes when the department has not spent their whole budget, often they'll spend it just because you say they want to get next year. But our managers are pretty good. That's why our free cash has been okay. I'm not saying every manager. I'm not saying
No
every
way.
manager's gets
Well,
money.
I mean,
But a lot of them don't go-
fair,
I don't see that
they've
rush
been
of
seeing
spending
budget
money.
cuts for years, so there's
Yes.
not always gonna be a lot of money.
I'll
There's
tell you who
always
does. I
some.
mean, I can tell you which ones do it, which ones don't.
I can
I
tell you
see
which
it.
ones. I can tell you which ones.
Oh, boy.
Those are the ones who do
So
it.
that's
Yeah.
definitely worth a discussion at some point.
Not all of them, but there are certain ones who do it.
Yeah, they should not have the money to start with.
But that's a whole different issue.
Upgrade the town website, including getting policies and procedures up there, kind of streamlined. Tamika and I were briefly chatting about streamlining a lot of the, some of the departments have their own separate website, I'll use the library for an example, or rec, dispatch, that if we can have those linked directly off the town website, so you're not Googling like Rutland dispatch or whatever. I don't care if they're separate sites, but just so that it's all there.
Right, because the library's not linked. I looked at it today.
Right.
They have their own website. It's not linked directly to the
Right.
town site.
Updating boards and commissions, who to contact, meeting times, dates, members, their term expiration, updated charges or get their current charges up. Include policies and procedures. HR goals and objectives, accountability, documentation, mandatory training with MMA or other, streamlining our policies and procedures, getting everything up to best practices. And then the long-term financial outlook, including school, tax levy, economic development, new growth, kind of the whole thing, as well as quarterly budget review, ongoing budget review. I think that both of those are.
I mean, I could give you guys the quarterly budget. I'm not sure that it would be helpful without knowing exactly what's going on. I don't think it's going to be that useful, but I have it. But
I think these 4 or 5 items are really good, especially coming out of the
Right.
COVID year.
And
for
to
us
be honest, we
focus
can, I mean, I know the Economic Development Commission, we've already had some discussions and it's underway and trying to look at that. Mitch is working with the schools, he's a representative of the
Yep.
schools. I know that Ron and Carol were just speaking about the website, so I think there's gonna be some action they can start
Yep.
taking on that. What was,
it'll be fun.
oh, HR, we've had,
You can
Ron's
enjoy it.
already
My
taken
thing.
some steps, so we've already started the process of developing a plan on HR. And what was the committees, so that's part of the website one, right, updating
Yeah,
a lot of it, so.
And under the proactive approach, kind of the economic development, diversifying boards and commissions, just kind of.
So somebody gonna take this and put it on and send it to the board? I'll do it if you want. If you give it to me, I'll take it back and in the next couple of days, I'll draft this all up into a document for everybody, or somebody else wants to do it.
Tamika,
I'll
have
take
you
it
been
back.
writing down?
I've got the minutes, so
Yeah,
I
so
wanna
should
she's
in
got
draft
the
it
most
so
of
I
it
can
down,
report it?
and if you want, I can either take pictures or give you these pages, so just can confirm like
Yeah.
what we had talked about, 'cause I know she's already writing it, so I don't.
Yeah, just draft it into like a little report with this stuff in it, that way we can share with other members and stuff, and I could start thinking about how to implement some of this stuff.
So I think these are great. I mean, I don't know if the rest of the board is happy with it, but I think
I'm
there's some
happy.
major issues that we've all had concerns, going. So
Yeah.
I think this gives us a little bit more direction on targeting some very specific
I think
issues.
coming out of a COVID year, like you had said, and a couple years of not having done this because of COVID and everything, I think it's a good kind of foundational.
And it's realistic, like we didn't do 100 things. I think we've got manageable.
That's key thing, yeah.
And I would
And it sounds
suggest
like we
that
all kind of agree, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I see, it sounds like there's a consensus,
There
which
sure is.
is good, because it shows people that we're all on the same page.
And we should make sure that they hit the agenda at least once a month, or
Even
every time.
updates, so like we said,
There
Mitch
are
is
no updates, or these are the
Mitch is working
updates.
on some of the school issues, if you work on the website, so,
Yeah.
if we have members that are working on different ones, just brief updates,
Yes.
like,
Yeah, that's good.
so that'd be great. So
Well, I like it.
we can
It's
kinda
working.
call these subcommittees, and then we
Yeah.
just put at the end of it, just subcommittee reports, and then people if could have updates.
I don't, these aren't subcommittees, I just think that.
Well, I think
Are-
that me and you are gonna be doing the school stuff, so we can report that. Me and her
Well, how
will
would
be
you
doing the
want
website,
to,
so
how
we
do you
can
wanna
report
define
that.
them? Cause put it on the
goal
agenda.
updates.
Goal
I'll put
update,
up there,
so,
sure.
Yeah,
alright, just put it, so we'll just add that to the agenda each
or
week.
maybe even so that, like, our agendas, so that the public sees what these goals are that we've talked about, because we've heard a lot of this from our constituents too, is just add an item to the agenda, board FY22 goals, and just put one of these as a subcategory, so that like we do with the TA update every week, or every 2 weeks, so that the the public knows these are the things that we're working on, and we could provide updates
Yep.
on those things.
So I would
Then we
ask you
welcome
all,
them to
as you
come
look
and
at the,
talk about it.
I would ask you guys, as you look at the town website, if you have suggestions, which of things you might like to see improvements on the website, shoot us an email to me and Carol so that we can look at those.
I would like to see that we get those contact on the committees and boards and things back on the website so people know who's on the board and who they might contact if they want to, because it used to be much more accessible and it's not anymore.
Why
So
do
you
not
saying
have
every
for some
commission
of the boards? 'Cause I
doesn't
use
have the
it as a
chair of
contact
the
form.
commission for a contact?
Well,
Usually
well,
it's through
some,
the chair.
some of, no, so some of
No.
the boards have like, the person's name is like blue, or it says like a contact form, so for some of the boards, that goes to me. For some of the boards, there's nothing that you can click on, there's no office hours,
Really?
there's no phone number, because we all use our personal cell phones. So for some of the smaller boards, there's no contact.
Usually the chairs, usually it's done by email, and the chair of every board and commission has your email, and you can email directly
No,
to the
some
chair.
of
No,
the boards
because
that
they all
have
use
those.
personal email addresses.
And
Oh, that's
I
right, we
think
don't
ours
have the.
is just an address, because we get mail, like snail mail sometimes.
So that's why
Yeah,
I've
just
been on
random
there for
snail
some of
mail.
them, but
Yeah.
I'm comfortable having my information
Right,
there
and when I
for
was
all
on the
of
finance
boards that
committee, I always had my
work
home number on there.
Yeah.
I didn't have my cell phone because I didn't want like 24/7 calls, but I had,
Yeah.
I mean, I had contact there should be
Well, that's
some
what we
kind
have
of
to talk
contact
about when we
information,
do the
and
website.
people should know who is on that
Maybe we can
board
figure
if
that
they're
out.
interested.
Well, I want it for the record that since Lyndon is chair, I think it should be his cell phone. That's on the contact or the website.
You
Well,
can, you can
I don't
punch it
answer
out.
when you call, so why would I answer when
There you go. What time is it?
yeah, it's getting, I'm a
You
little,
adjourn.
yeah.
I just got a long way home.
So I think we have a good direction. Is
Yeah.
everybody comfortable with,
I feel
what we
good.
decided?
Please, everybody, put your books back in the thing so I
Yeah.
can give it to.
So if we can get a motion to
Motion to
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
Right?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you
That was
very
good.
much.
That was